All right, and
Fancy.
we are live. It's at home songwriting and songwriter theory. Same place, same time. Joseph, what's happening?
Not much. Not much. Well, actually, I lied. I had a busy day. I don't know why I said that, but how are you?
I'm good. I'm good. I had a busy day too, and I'm glad that we got all the technical stuff worked out. I can see you,
Yeah.
so that's good.
Yeah. Minor detail on a live stream.
Totally. Well, I know that I had reached out to you and said, "Hey, would you ever consider, working together? We both have songwriting
Yeah.
YouTubes." And you and I were supposed to get together, maybe talk for a half hour or
Mhm.
so, and I think we spent what, like 5 hours
I
chatting?
think it was 5 hours. That's not even hyperbole, yeah. It might have
No,
been north of 5 hours, like 5:20 or something like that. It was a long time. I
it
felt
was
pretty
like
bad after that, honestly. I'm like, "Oh, I don't know if that was mostly my."
it was fun. It was like, we had a lot to talk about and a lot of things to go through, that's for sure. And it looks like we might have locked up. Looks like Joseph may have locked up here on us.
Fault or
Oh, there we go.
yeah, and we're back.
And you're back.
Yeah.
Well, I just thought it'd be fun to get together and talk songwriting and talk about what you have going on, what I have going on, and
Sure.
then most importantly, people watching, taking questions in the chat. Would love to see what people have to say and what sort of questions they have for us too. So,
Yeah.
what have you been working on lately?
For on the content side or the songwriting side?
Both.
Okay, but
I-
we'll start with the songwriting side because maybe that's more interesting. Actually, today my wife left a little early so that I could get some work done on recording vocals because I think we talked about this, and I think I've said this to anybody in my audience, so they probably know this. But I'm fine at completing songs. I'm not so fine at completing the recording of songs, specifically vocals. The amount of songs that I always have that are like vocals away is embarrassing. So we kind of finally figured out a system where normally like on a Saturday, my wife will take our baby and just go hang out with her parents for several hours, so I can just like concentrate on it and get it done because it's the only thing left for an EP. So I guess I'm working on that on the recording side, but that's not really songwriting because the songwriting is complete for that.
So
But
in those cases, do you have like a demo recording or do you have like a
mm,
rough cut or like how do you know what when you go back to actually cut it? Like what's your process there?
for the recording
Yeah, so
side,
like
yeah.
when because you said the songs are written, so do you
Mhm.
have like a rough recording so you remember it or what does
Yeah,
that look like?
that's a great question. So I actually I think I just put a video out about this, or maybe it's upcoming. You start to lose track, but no, I think it just came out where I talk about how I used to songwrite in what probably we would consider the traditional songwriter way, sort of the image of, you grab a guitar or you're at the piano and you have a notepad maybe, and there's no technology involved, right? No questions at all, or no technology at all. And eventually I realized that that was a harder way to write for no reason outside of like I just told myself this is what songwriters do. But then I'm like, wait, why don't I leverage technology? Because I realized just like a few too many times, and I'm sure you had this experience at some point as well. Just a few too many times, I would come up with an idea at 11 o'clock at night, and the way I used to do things is I would actually like play it over and over once I had something that I thought was good to try to ingrain it in my memory. And this
Yeah.
was before smartphones too, or before I had a smartphone anyway. So I sort of did that as the way to theoretically not forget it the next day. And then, some ideas that I thought were really good, which maybe the next day I would have thought they were junk. So maybe they weren't good ideas. Frankly, most of this was when I was 15, 16. So they weren't good ideas.
Yeah.
But like there were just too many ideas that I lost. So now what I do is I actually record as I write. I call it producer style songwriting because I find it helpful too. And we may have talked about this offline, but I guess for online,
Yeah.
there's something about hearing different timbres and sounds that can inspire your songwriting in different directions. So if you just hear the same acoustic piano over and over again, it tends to kind of inspire in a similar direction. Whereas, like something as simple as I found this awesome foghorn sound that Venus Theory made, I think.
Oh,
Uh,
sure. Yeah.
Ja and I saw his foghorn thing on Labs, I think it is, and it's totally free. I'm probably gonna do, like, a short about this, but, I
Cool.
found that sound and I'm like, "Yes," because I really like things that just kinda have the vibe of ocean. I tend to use ocean imagery. I'm from New England originally, so ocean imagery speaks to me. But the foghorn has that sound where it just, like, vaguely sounds ocean, but probably nobody would be like, "Oh, that's like a modulated foghorn." But it just kinda has that vibe but that, like, could inspire a song or I wrote 2 songs that were just off of I was like, "Hey, organ is underutilized. Organs are freaking epic. I love those things."
Yeah.
So, like, and even things that would seem pedestrian on, say, the piano or the guitar, just changing up the instrument can go a long way. So anyway, all to say, my process now is usually I'm sort of recording as I write to the point that sometimes I have, like, an 80% recorded and arranged song before I finish the lyric. Like, for example, the other day I was working on a lyric for a song that's called The Wanderer, and I have uh it almost completely recorded. I mean, like guitars, synths, strings, the piano, which is the main instrument of it. It's almost completely recorded. And I even know what the melody is and have the melody recorded with MIDI and all that. But I'm trying to work that first and second verse. I think I might have got the first verse lyric down the other day, or at least close.
Yeah.
But that second verse is the only thing left. So usually my workflow is something like that. What's your workflow when it comes to songwriting usually?
Well, I get bored with them sometimes, but I would say that I'm
Mm,
similar to you where I'm actually doing production and songwriting at the same time.
mhm.
Um, I find that if I write lyrics first, that my melodies are not as strong. So I try to pull melody
Agreed.
into the process as soon as possible, including sometimes just starting
Mhm,
with a melody and then sort of building everything from there. Um, I just
mm.
think melody is not talked about a lot. I think songwriters we
Sure.
instinctively know that melody is important, but I mean, I actually think it's like it's what carries your lyric, right? So if you don't have a good
Mhm.
melody, people won't necessarily pay attention to the words.
For sure.
Like I just don't think strong lyrics can save a bad melody, and that's funny because I teach lyric writing, but it's the it's
Yeah.
not about one or the other, it's about how they marry together, but I think having a strong melody
Mhm.
is important. So I write a lot of melody first. I do a lot of I watched your video actually, like the singer-songwriter method versus the producer method, and
Oh,
I was
yeah,
like, the
yeah. Yeah.
producer process is kind of like you're top lining your own track, right? And
Yeah.
I even think if someone is only playing piano or they're only playing guitar, when
Mhm.
you take your brain out of playing and singing at the same time, I think there's something else that you
Yes.
can tap into as well. So, like, recording your piano or recording your guitar and then writing to your own track that way, I think
Mhm.
frees up your mental capacity too. I don't know if anybody watching,
Absolutely.
has any thoughts or anything on that, but definitely put it in the chat or ask questions too. Um, but yeah, lately I've been doing a lot of teaching. I've been leading a lot of live workshops and things. I haven't done as many YouTube
Mm.
videos. As you know, it takes a lot of time, and I kind of go like
For sure.
ebbs and flows. Um,
Yeah.
but no, I've been working on a new project for myself as like a solo artist project.
Mm.
But I've also been experimenting with AI vocals lately. um, so I've
Interesting. You're the second person to bring that up to me in the last 2 weeks, actually.
So,
Yeah.
I kind of created this other little project called Sound Limit
Uh-huh.
Society, like, I came up with this name and, like,
Huh.
I
That's a
recorded this
sweet
song
name.
called Tell Your Lies, and
Yeah.
it's totally like I used synthesizer V to,
Uh-huh.
like, put together the melody, and then I typed in the lyrics and it sang it, and then I used the site Lalals to use an original vocal to
Mhm.
replace it. So, like, having another
Interesting.
having another quote unquote singer, like, singing my songs is kind of a cool thing to hear for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, you're the second person to bring that up to me, recently. That it does seem like that would be so interesting. A part of me is like, I don't wanna put the work into something that would end up being a voice other than, like an AI voice, but it also seems like such a cool, sweet technology to play with, for sure.
For me, it's just another creative outlet, like,
Yeah.
I used a female voice, so, like, something that I
Mhm.
can't, sound like.
That you can't do.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Um, we have some comments. Dory said that lately she's been writing to tracks, and she writes it helps with creating stronger melodies. Absolutely.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Actually, my favorite my after much experimentation, um, the way I used to write is gonna connect to a couple things you said. Like, I think to add to that, there's a lot of good stuff in there. You should definitely clip the last the last thing you said. There's a lot of good stuff. But um, the way I actually initially started writing songs was I would write a poem essentially and then put it to music. And the
Yep.
thought process from me at the time was I've always been a very lyrics are important person. And I guess I came to songwriting in a slightly different way than most. Most people are just like musician, 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 and then they're like, "Oh, I want to write my own stuff." I more was like, I was a musician. I had piano lessons since 5 and all that, but I also really liked writing. I did writing classes at the library. I wrote for fun when I was homeschooled. My mother allowed me for like 2 hours a day to just write, which I'm thankful for.
Cool.
So I kind of came into it from both angles. And because of that, I had like this thing about lyrics, and I still have this thing about lyrics. But I was convinced that like the best way to have the best lyric you can is to start with lyrics. And what I've learned over time is I think that the best lyrics usually come with time, and no matter whether I do it first or later, the lyrics will end up being more or less the same quality. Like there's no difference whether I write lyrics last or first. What most determines the quality of my lyrics is how much time I put into it, combined with, if you're lucky and the muse visits you or inspiration strikes, right? Sometimes you'll get lucky and it'll be like, wow, it's perfectly tight. It says everything I want to say. It's really dense, meaningfully, which I guess not all songs have to be, but I try to go for that.
Sure.
But connected to that comment, the my favorite way that I eventually landed on is writing an instrument part that I want to make sure I get to be good first, and then writing the melody. Because I also find that like if you write a melody to then, for at least for me, to then come up with an interesting piano part or bass line is way more difficult than just improvise at the piano for a bass line or piano part or interesting guitar hook or whatever, and then write an interesting melody. I find that order is way easier for me, where I'm actually starting with like, okay, let me just make sure I nail the piano riff because I want this song to have a good piano riff, or let me make sure I nail the bass line. I want to have an interesting bass line in the song. And it's actually pretty easy to figure out the chords, the underlying chords from that.
Yeah.
And then the melody, you can still make a really strong melody. And to your point, even as a lyrics, I care deeply about lyrics. I'm not interested in a song if the lyrics don't do it for me. And yet, I will concede that melody is absolutely king.
Yeah.
Melody is the most important thing because to your point, uh, you know, who if the melody sucks, who cares?
Right.
Like you're not even gonna pay attention to how great your lyrics are if the melody sucks. Maybe you can get away with it if you like have a sweet bass line or something. I don't know. Seven Nation Army comes to mind for me where like, does anybody even know that melody? They're too busy listening to the sweet like bass line guitar riff thing. So
Like,
like there are songs that I think get away with
but
it.
here's the
Maybe it does have a strong melody. I don't even
Yeah,
know.
but here's
Uh,
here's the thing though with melody though. Melody is the combination of rhythm and pitch. And a lot of times the
yeah.
rhythm is where the meat is, right?
Mhm.
So like
Sure.
think about songs where it's rapped, right? Like there's
Yeah.
good rap and there's bad rap. Like you can tell when a rapper is actually talented, right? Like whether you like rap or
Yeah.
not,
Sure.
the rhythm is there. I think what becomes really important is how does your rhythm sit with the pitches that you're singing and like does it
Mhm.
all work together? And I actually think you don't have to choose one or the other. Like
Yeah.
as a well-rounded songwriter, your lyrics should be good and your melody should be
Mhm.
good. And
Yeah.
what that means is does it communicate an idea and sort of an emotion clearly, right? Like,
Mhm.
does your listener feel
Yeah.
something? I think that's what it comes down to.
Yeah, and off of that, I can't remember if I just did I might have done a podcast on this or maybe it's upcoming, but this reminds me of something that I you ever have that thing where, like, I think in your back of your mind, you knew this all along, but it took you a while to kinda fully grasp it in a way that you could actually articulate it?
Yeah.
But I realized that because on the one hand, I feel like there's an element of if you have a better melody plus better lyrics plus better bass line, plus theoretically that makes a better song. But then I also realized that with whether it's songs I liked or songs of my own and how I would rank those, I realized that there are some songs that I think the instrument part is vastly superior, right?
Oh,
Sweet piano riff
yep.
compared to just basic strummed chords. So based on my own criteria, you would think that I would always rank the one with what I think is an interesting piano riff above the one that's, just basic strummed chords. Because normally agnostic of anything else, I would choose the interesting piano riff over strum
Yeah.
chords. But to your point, it's the cohesion that matters, right?
Right.
So it's kind of like block chords. I don't know if you'll be able to hear this, but like normally I would think something like this would be better. Is that too loud? That's probably too
No,
loud.
I think that's
But
about
like,
right. It's
oh
a little
really?
quiet, actually.
So that simple, whatever, but like that to me normally would be way more interesting than just block chords, right? I mean, this is literally like doing a fifth.
Yeah.
Doing a fifth. I take out the third actually intentionally in that. Well, the third is in the bass technically, but like, but because of how it fits with the song and the vibe of the song. So like this one is a song that's kind of got a lonely sound. It's about the end of a relationship, blah blah blah. It fits perfectly with the subject material. So even though by itself it's nothing special, it's one of those things that if I tried to rewrite the piano part to be quote more interesting, I think it would actually make the
Yeah.
song worse just because it wouldn't
So
fit with the
that's
vibe.
the concept of
Uh,
prosody, right? That's how the structure and the things that are happening musically support what you're saying lyrically, right? Like, you were playing the same chord
yes.
there, right? But
Mhm.
one, you were just playing in a different way, and it gives us a different
Yeah.
emotion, and that I think is yeah, I think that's the thing too, like, you hit the nail on the head. It's like not every song is good in every single way. Some songs, like
Yeah.
dance music, like, those songs are designed to make you move.
Mm.
Like, you don't wanna think while you're dancing, so
Yeah,
you don't want this whole
that's true.
story going on. You just it's all, booty
Yeah.
shaking.
Deep philosophy.
Yeah, um,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point too. That is a good point. Where like that's another thing that I realized over time. It's like there's certain rules that I would hold myself to with my specific music that I'm writing, or even like my
yeah,
favorite artists. But then there's like other artists that are like, for what they're trying to do, it's great. It's kind of like
yeah,
movies, right? I mean, some movies are meant to be character driven, and you might say nothing happened. There was no action. But for some movies, that's the
right.
right thing because it was a character drama. It didn't need that. Or like for example, I just watched Oppenheimer. Some people like complain not enough explosions or whatever. I think it had the perfect amount of explosions. The movie was fantastic. It held my attention for 3 hours. And we don't need everything to be an MCU movie that has explosions every 3 seconds.
Yeah,
They both just have different
exactly.
jobs, right? One is sort of entertainment that you forget right after. Oppenheimer is something I'll probably remember for years, whereas whatever the last MCU movie I watched. Not that there's anything wrong with them, well, newer ones maybe, but anyway, they just have like less to sink your teeth into, but that's okay because that's not
Right.
the point. That's not the point of them.
The Age of
Yeah.
Brevity
What are your
asked,
daily
"What are your daily songwriting routines?"
Yeah, I saw that.
Do
That's a
you,
good
uh
question.
do you have daily stuff?
That's a good question. I
Okay.
fluctuate. So I'm a very I wish that I had the consistency that I did at least some songwriting every day. I'm more streaky about like for a month or 2, I will be like an hour a day, and then life will get busy, and then I'll be like 3 days a week or something like that. Um, so for me, it's not so much a daily songwriting routine, and just as a connection to this, because also somebody emailed me recently with a question about something similar to this. which got me thinking about I don't know if you do this, but for me, when I sit down to songwrite, I I I never sit down and say, "Okay, I'm going to songwrite," or "I'm gonna write songs," because some people don't like when I say songwrite
Yeah.
because it's not a real word. But, uh, yeah, but, like, I never sit down and say that. That's way too vague and
Mm.
completely unhelpful for me. And we only have
Yeah.
so much time in the day, right? If you're not a professional songwriter, that's all you do, and you have 8 hours a day to give, we gotta maximize our time. So for me, I usually go into a songwriting session that's going to be an hour long with a very specific goal. So I will have a songwriting session where the entire goal is I'll sit in front of a keyboard or with my guitar and just come up with musical ideas. The whole goal is come up with as many musical ideas as I can. And in theory, we're trying to get towards good
Sure.
musical ideas, not just an amount. And then there are other times I'll just sit, I'll even like get on Google Images and I will just go like image searching and try to find a cool song title or make up a cool song title that resonates with me that I'm like, "Ooh, what would that song be about?" And then there are other ones where it's like my goal for today. I know that I have the second verse to finish because the second verse is almost always a jerk when it comes to lyrics, and at least to me, more so than other sections. It's just one of the harder ones to get quite right. So I'll like no, my goal is I'm gonna write tons of lyrics. I'll write pages worth of lyrics that are all just iterating on the ideas for that second verse. I'm just gonna write and then from there, I might have a day where it's like, okay, I have a first verse, but I kind of want to tweak it, and some of the words aren't quite right. It doesn't fit super well in the third line. So back to the routine thing. There is no routine that is
Yeah.
like always going to be the same, but I find it helpful to just have a specific thing in mind that you're going to do that day, whether it's based on the projects you have upcoming, right? So in my case, I know I have to release an EP, so I'm recording
Yep.
vocals, that's the main thing. But then I know what the next EP is, so that's the one I'm gonna spend most of my time writing. But sometimes I get sick of those songs, so then instead I'm like, let me just play around on the piano for an hour and figure out, maybe some more ideas to become the 4th EP or whatever it
Do
ends up
you,
being.
so I wanna go back to what you said about, like, iterating on your second verse idea. So when you
Mm,
say you just write page after page, are you
sure.
just, like, whatever's coming to your
Mhm.
mind, are you just free writing, or is it more structured than that, or is it both? Like, what does that look like for you?
Yeah, yeah, that's that's a good question that I don't know if I've ever answered before, actually. So sort of both. So a thing that I'm a big proponent of is before you write any lyrics, even try to write lyrics, before you constrain yourself with like, oh, I have to have meter and maybe I have to have rhyme. Before any of that, I like to do what is essentially almost like a prose writing, just a
Yep.
journal entry type thing, where I just don't think about editing, don't think about lyrics, don't think about meter, think about none of that, and just write as if it's a journal entry from the main character, which may or may not be me. But I just write and I'll explore, and there's no rules. I try as best as I can to
Yeah.
turn that editor off. So I also will re-go back and do some of that if I'm really stuck on a second verse. Theoretically, I know what the second verse needs to cover because usually I will outline first, so I at least know the main story that it needs to accomplish. But sometimes you just get stuck, and it can be hard too to realize that a part of the reason you're stuck is that really, let's say it's 4 lines. Your second line really needs to become your third line in order for everything to kind of be told in a
Yep.
cohesive way, and then your third line's just garbage and you got to get rid of it versus it can't be edited into something better, or it can, but that's not most ideal. So sometimes it's hard to like know when to double down and keep editing it into something good versus starting over. Usually I will try some hybrid where once in a while I might take a section and iterate on it, where like I will take one line, tweak it, write a new version of it, tweak it again, write a new version of it. And I'll say, what if I just don't say this at
Yeah.
all? What if I find a totally different way to say this? Especially if it's not working. But sometimes I think the more you do it, you kind of train yourself into knowing when this is close and this is the right path versus abandon this. You're never going to get this to work. I don't think we'll ever be perfect at it, but I do think it's something that like sort of comes with time.
Yeah, you just
But
said, like, 3 things
yeah.
that I was trying to, like, mentally make notes of what I wanted to comment on. First one is never being necessarily perfect. Like,
Mhm,
I know some people that literally paralyze themselves in their writing because they get stuck thinking like I have to like make this song a certain way. And I just there's no such thing as right or wrong when you're writing songs. It's just does it communicate what you want it to communicate, right?
mhm,
So there's that comment. Going back to you use the word cohesion.
mhm,
I think that's something that we can lose as songwriters super easily when we focus so much line by line. Like at
mm,
some point you have to step back and see like, how is this communicating all together, right? Like
sure.
how does the whole section set this up and does it actually make sense? Like
Yeah,
are the events in the right order? Are you, sort of setting the scene before you tell us, how people are feeling, like that showing before telling, like all of that stuff.
mhm.
I think that's such a huge thing that I think we miss sometimes because we're so focused on each individual word that we sort of forget like, "Oh, we're actually telling a story here," you know?
Yeah. I think that's a hard part of any creative thing, right? Is the balance of you need to be detail oriented, but you also need to not lose the forest for the trees or whatever that phrase is, right? So
Totally.
like there's that interesting they're both true, right? There is a value to a specific line that is killer and getting every single word right. But also, you can't have that at to your point, the sacrifice of the bigger picture. Something I think I've compared it to before is it's like a quotable movie. A quotable movie does not make a good movie necessarily. So theoretically,
Mhm.
if we took it to the extreme, right, you could have a movie where every quote is just golden. It's a whatever to you it makes a golden quote, right? It's super
Yeah.
quotable, super cool. The cool guy says the cool thing, and the funny guy says the funny thing. Whatever. That wouldn't make a good movie, though. Even though, because a movie is not just a sum of its lines. Its lines are a
Yeah.
super important part, but like you need to sometimes have the setup, or even for jokes, right? You need to have the setup for the joke. Not every line in The Office is trying to be funny. Some of it is setting up for an even funnier thing later. And to do that, you need to sometimes not be funny in the moment. So I think like
Yeah.
with lyric writing, it's kind of the same thing, right? Where you have to understand that even though there is value to the nitty gritty, or at least in my opinion, there's value to the nitty gritty. You cannot lose the big picture just because you're obsessing about the nitty gritty. Um, yeah,
I I also think that we easily forget that the singer is the narrator of our story too,
mm,
right? And thinking, "Would this character actually say what I want them to say?"
yeah,
Um, if your singer is like especially if you're writing for another artist, like if your artist is a 16-year-old girl who's a pop star, she's not gonna sing about stuff like old guys talk about. Do you know what I
yeah,
mean? Like, you have
yeah,
to think about, would your singer actually say this? Because I think that really can either help or really take away from the believability of your song.
yeah. Right
Um,
now, Olivia Rodrigo and John Mayer are not talking about the same things.
I don't know if
Not
they
that he's an
ever
old
talked
man,
about
but
yeah, I don't know yeah,
relatively, yeah.
John Mayer's old compared to her.
Yeah, compared to
Um we had a comment in the chat. Car Chronicles with Miss Mitchell said, was given about 16 tracks years ago, couldn't do anything with them, but recently decided to give them a listen, and now words are coming. So focus is the issue and staying
Mhm.
motivated. Yeah,
Ooh,
yeah. Motivation and just finding time, like, it's hard. Like you said, there's days where you just have so much going on and it's not always writing a full song. It's doing kind of what you had said, looking for titles.
yeah.
It's just writing down ideas. Are you a typer or do you like use notebooks? Like,
Yeah, so I am pretty much exclusively a typer. I did an experiment, it was probably earlier this year, maybe it was last year, time goes fast, where I tried going back to notepads, and I did find it helpful for sort of exploratory writing, which to me, I guess all writing is exploration. Editing is
yeah,
the building or the refining, the putting a bow on it. But writing, I think, should be seen more as exploration than building, because building it implies like once you have the foundation, you've committed, right? So I
yeah,
kind of like the
yeah, yeah,
perception of like I'm just exploring this direction, this direction. I can write stupid crap for 2 hours straight, but if the third hour I come up with gold, it was all worth it. Um, And then I guess connecting to that question, something in this, I'm sorry, I forgot the name of who asked that, and it's not up again, but Car Chronicles with wow, that's a long
That's a
name.
you. I'm
That
assuming
seems like
that's
a
a
real
YouTube
YouTube
channel.
channel. Yeah, for sure. Now I'm curious. I have to check it out after.
I
But
know.
um, something that I found helpful. This is not a cure all. Motivation is always a thing that's going to come and go. In general, like concentrating less on motivation and more on discipline, I think is the way to go. Which I know I say this
Mm.
right after admitting that even for me, sometimes it's because I'm editing a video or whatever. The irony is it comes at the cost of I didn't get to songwriting that day. But I do find it helpful if you break things into baby steps. I think if there's one thing, and this is another thing I'm gonna have a video about here soon, just because it's top of mind for me. But I realized that the thing I did essentially to make songwriting easier for me, where now I can get more consistent results more consistently, which is redundant, but alas, is breaking it into baby steps. So just to talk about lyric writing for a second, I think that a lot of times the reason lyric writing is overwhelming is and I sometimes say this sort of poking fun at it, but I'm not poking fun at the people who do it. I did it too. But we basically ask ourselves, like, okay, I'm going to sit down and I'm going to improvise poetry, which is really what we're asking ourselves to do if we stare at a blank page and ask ourselves to write lyrics. We're asking ourselves to have meter right away, to have the right words right away, to get rhyme right away. And the reason that's probably going to fail is we're asking just way too much of ourselves. So sometimes, like, a way to stay motivated is to put yourself in a position where you're going to get wins, which I think comes from two things.
Mm.
One is to have a little bit of a perspective shift where, like, once you realize, let's say you have a song that's verse, chorus, bridge, chorus, right? So, and let's assume the choruses all have the same lyrics. You have 4 song sections worth of lyrics. For simple math, let's just say they each have 5 lines. So we have 20 lines. If
Yep.
you in one night, in 1 hour, can just take one line and take it from, not working at all to like this line is exactly saying what it needs to say, just as a frame of reference, that's 1/20th of the whole song in 1 hour. So like in 20 days, you went from lyrics that you thought were awful to lyrics that you're really proud of. And I know that's a little over mathy. That's not exactly how it would work line by line. We just talked about that. But
Yeah.
like learning to sort of appreciate I changed one word in my lyric today and it actually made a huge difference because it went from a verb that's just pedestrian and doesn't do anything for anybody to a really visceral verb that can make a big difference. So learning to like celebrate those things and then also just breaking it into those baby steps where you kind of set yourself up for success along the way. And everybody feels better, right? If we check
Yeah.
30 things off, 30 is a lot. Let's say we check 5 things off the list, the to-do list for today, we probably feel great about ourselves. Even if we did the same amount of work, but only checked one thing off the list, or we had too big of a goal and we didn't get to check anything off, we feel crappy. But we did the same
Right.
thing. So that was a
So
lot, but yeah.
no, so that concept reminds me of, and I know that you're a reader, you like to read books and stuff too, but
Yeah.
there's a book, I think it's Jeff Olson or David Olson. I don't remember. I think the last name is Olson, but it's called The
Mhm.
Slight Edge Theory.
Huh.
And it's about tiny efforts add up over time. So I
Oh, yeah.
love that you just said like taking bits and pieces, like don't feel like you have to write one entire song in one sitting. Like
Oh, for sure.
in my mind, I'm thinking if you write 0 songs in a month and all of a sudden you take 20 days and you do 1 line a day, you're
Mhm.
gonna finish more than 1 song in a month. Like you've had
Yeah.
100% improvement
Mhm.
over what you did before, right? Because
Yeah.
like, every 1 is better than 0, so I think that's
Mhm.
cool. Um,
And also just
going
learning to take those little moments too, because we both mentioned the busyness. I think a lot of people will be like, "Oh, I don't have 2 hours to write today." So that instead they watch 2 episodes of, I don't know, Gilmore Girls. My wife's watching that, so I'll pick on that. Uh,
but see,
if
I
that's
u
embarrassing for her, I'm sorry, but it seems wholesome actually. See, I'm not gonna lie, I watched the episode with her. I'm like, "Wow, I miss when they were like just wholesome, feel good TV stuff." But anyway, so like that's 45-minute. I think there are 45-minute episodes. It's really easy to say, "Oh, I don't have enough time," but another benefit of like breaking things into small bits is let's say you're at the doctor's office, you can get some songwriting in realistically if you just say, you know what, I'm going to go Google image search for art about a specific thing, like ocean art, just start there. And then you're like, oh, okay, stormy ocean art, or you say calm seas art or something. And soon
Yeah.
you might find a picture that somebody else painted, put hours and hours of work into, that you can be like, wow, I see a great song title in this. And
Yep.
you accomplish something, right? That could be one of your 5 songs that end up being on your EP for the year. And you accomplished it just by not being too finicky about like, oh, I need 4 hours straight in order to get anything done. And just being like, hey, I have a few minutes here. What can I do to be
I
productive?
mean, so you said your wife was watching Gilmore Girls.
Yeah.
Those shows are like gold mines of song ideas.
That's fair. That's
Like
fair.
the dialogue, there's tons of titles, there's tons of
Mm,
stuff. Like I watch the 90 Day Fiance, like all 3,000 different episodes that they have, and
yeah.
I have pages and pages of song ideas that I get from 90 Day Fiance. I think trashy TV is a great place to get interesting info. And I think Joseph froze up, but Sonny the Flying Cat talked about one word changing can really disconnect from the main character of the story. That's a great comment. Are you back, Joseph? Ooh, we lost him.
Uh, oh,
There you go. There you are.
weird. Sorry about that, everyone. Uh,
Um,
yeah.
did you see the Sonny the Flying Cat said that changing one word from girl to gal totally disconnected from one of the characters in a song?
I
That's
totally buy that. Yeah. I could
yeah.
see that. I could see that. I mean, Gal has a very specific, like, I don't know if it has to be Southern, but it kind of has that vibe, I guess. It's kind of like I'm trying to think of a thing to pick on without getting too. I don't know. It's just like mentioning a truck in a song automatically makes it sound kind of country, right? Which there's
Yeah.
nothing wrong with that, unless you're not that, right? So it's kind of like me. Like I had a truck for a little bit that I was in college, and my dad had a truck and all that. I always felt like I just didn't belong in a truck. I'm too short to be a truck guy. I'm 5'7". So it always felt just wrong. And I'm just not like I don't know. I just don't fit the truck thing. I'm like a software developer and a songwriter, and
Sonny
I don't do physical labor. I do like mental stuff. I'm
yeah.
just like not the guy to like the truck implies that I would be useful with your construction work.
Oh,
Useful.
just internet issues. So Sonny says old is what gal makes it sound like. I kind of agree. I was thinking that. Um, while we're waiting for Joseph to come back, Sonny, you said you wrote a song from Love Is Blind and Yellowstone. Um, Jeanette, you were writing ideas in the bus on the way from work. Holy cow, a bus would be a great, like, just full of characters and object writing and free writing. Like, that's a great place to go for sure.
Goodness,
You're back.
man. Not to slander any companies, but Spectrum, you're killing me today.
Well,
Lost that sponsorship. Just kidding.
dang it.
Uh,
Um, does your wife support like your songwriting and stuff? Does she help you at all, or what's that deal? That
yeah,
might
that's
be too personal, but
yeah, no, she's I think she's just right in the realm that I mean it'd be really cool if she was somebody that like did it on her own and we did it together. I think that could be cool, but she's kind of dabbled a little bit. Like I think she really likes NF, so she kind of writes like rap type things that at
cool.
some point I'm supposed to help her with. We just haven't quite gotten to it. And I'm kind of excited for that because honestly, connecting this to, I thought I saw a question come up about writing for others versus writing for yourself, which I think is a good question. Not one I would be very
Yeah.
good at answering because I basically only write for myself. But I do find that interesting that I don't know if you feel this way, but for me, just the idea of writing for somebody, not me, relieves so much pressure. Because for me, it's like I have a certain standard, and it helps too that like when I'm talking about a certain standard on songwriter theory, any song I put out that doesn't meet one criteria that I mentioned once in a video, somebody's gonna be there commenting on it, like you said, blah blah blah. It's like, okay, I might
Yeah,
have said that because I did this in this song and I regretted it after, or and every rule's meant to be broken and blah blah blah. But
right.
um, yeah. So anyway, she is distantly supportive, I guess is the way to put it. Like she'll ask about it, but it's not like we write together. Although there are some people I've been kind of I have one songwriter friend that I keep talking to him about writing stuff together, just because it would be different and interesting. And I'm such a
Yeah.
solo, do it myself kind of person that I think it would be good for me, frankly.
Yeah, I'm mostly a solo writer too, but
Mhm,
the person who actually asked the question, Paul Beckerman, Paul and I have written a few songs together actually that we've put out on online. Like I have a song called Magic Love that we wrote together.
mhm.
We wrote a song called Bugs on the Windshield. That was more of a country song that we wrote. That's out.
I probably would have guessed that based on the title. Yeah.
Yeah. But no, I songwriting for me has always been more of a solitary, like something I
Mhm.
do alone, so I
Yeah.
have to really trust somebody
Mhm.
to, like, co-write with them,
Yeah.
or at least we have to hang out and, like, vibe and at least see if we're at least somewhat on the same page, right? So,
Yeah.
sounds like we're similar there.
Yeah,
Um,
for sure. It's so hard to I think a part of it is maybe I'm more controlling than like it's just to me, there's like a mental thing of like, if this song is my baby, I don't want anybody to be like the most that I would ever want somebody to touch it is like back in the day when I had a band in college. Uh, the guy who did guitars, I thought he always just understood what I was going for, and his guitar stuff, I always thought he nailed it for the most part. Sometimes I had to be
yeah,
like, all right, this isn't the vibe we're going for, but that a that's hard to find, and b it's teach their own, right? I
right.
got a comment the other day um, on uh, on a video that I thought was interesting, where the guy sort of told the story of I don't remember the band, but it was a rock band that apparently their method of writing was always they wrote together in the studio. The lead singer was off writing the lyrics while they were recording the other stuff, and the way he presented it, it felt like he was kind of saying, "Ah, alas, I can't do it that way. That's the best way to write." And my response was something like, "Well, that might have been the best way to write for them, but different people are different, right? If you have the right band, then sure, writing as a band can be great."
Yeah,
Um, in my opinion, and this might be totally wrong, I feel like you can write music together with people, and it doesn't diminish the quality. But I'm kind of the opinion that the more people write the lyrics, the more likely it's gonna become more generic and kind of cookie cutter, just because the likelihood of 2 people really under like, I think we talked about this offline, but I guess for online sake, also this could be fun because if I remember, we slightly disagree on this, so that's more fun, I guess. Um, but but there's something to like the way I experience something and the way you like let's say we start with okay, this is gonna be a breakup song, which is super generic, right?
yeah,
The way everybody responds to a breakup is very different, and the way we respond each day is very different, right? If I think back, the first 3 days, I literally cried and watched Everybody Loves Raymond. That is what I did. That's not even hyperbole. I barely slept. I did not drink for like 50 hours, which in retrospect I realized is incredibly dangerous. But like I was that distraught.
like, did
And then
not so, like, not drinking, not, like, not drinking alcohol, but you just did not
no,
drink,
like
period.
water, not yeah, nothing. I
Wow,
don't think I ate or drank for like it was later I did the math, so it's possible I'm off by like 5 hours or something, but it was 2 days worth of
wow,
I worked at Panera Bread at the time, so I did that, and I tried to not cry while watching Everybody Loves Raymond, which did help me, because I love that show. But anyway, so that was my first response, right? But then a few weeks later, there was sort of the ticked off response, right? The like, wait a second, you kind of rehearse in your head and you feel like, they're being a little unfair here, or they should have communicated better. And you start to maybe play the blame game a little bit. And then, another few months later, maybe you soften on that part. And, eventually you settle into a different perspective, right? The perspective I have today is very different than the perspective I had 24 hours after, 3 months after. a
Yeah.
year after even. So depending on you and I's point of view, if we're trying to co-write a song together, you might be envisioning one type of break. Not to mention, this is to say nothing of like, there's different, there's the breakups where you're like, they broke up with me, and honestly, I was going to break up with them anyway, so thank God. Versus like the other, you broke up with them and you're like, crap, I shouldn't have done that. Or they broke up with you, and to this day, you think, I wish they didn't, right? It's a wide variety of breakups. And I just think like when it comes to lyrics, it's difficult. It's going to be extra difficult to really be on the same page. And even if you do drill into the same specific thing, the way we process things is different, just different human beings. And I think something that you've mentioned before is there's something to sometimes getting more specific actually makes it more
Universal.
generally
Yep.
universal. That's right. I
Yep.
think it was you that said this, but
Yeah.
I think that's a great point, and the irony, I think, is that when you have too many writers writing lyrics, you end up being so universal that it's not universal at all. It's just kind of cookie cutter. But that's just a
Um,
theory. I don't really know.
we had a comment from Orpheus Audio Academy, who I
Oh,
think
my guy.
was your guest,
Yeah.
right? On your
Uh-huh.
channel? He said he writes alone too, but started a band with a friend once they were basically two halves of one entity. Um, whatever he came up with, the other person loved. Whatever he created, he loved. That's rare but amazing.
For sure.
Yeah. That's like Jimmy
For
Jam,
sure.
Terry Lewis stuff going on there.
Yeah. Not to mention there's another element to like, I don't know if you've experienced this, but so I've done this whether it was like with YouTube channel things I tried in the past or whatever, but another difficult thing of working with somebody else is you both have to care equally or at close.
Yes.
And just finding somebody else who and not via this, right? We met because we both do songwriting YouTube. So in our
Right.
case, it's easy to be like, we both are passionate about songwriting. We literally take the time to make content about songwriting. Of course, we're passionate. The
Right.
idea of doing that when you're not is insane. But normally in life, right, to really meet somebody that is equally as passionate about almost any given thing is very difficult, especially something as
Yes.
specific as songwriting. I can find a bunch of people that are maybe as passionate about the good old Star Wars as I am, maybe, because there's a lot of people like that. But for something like, songwriting and then even maybe a specific genre, right? Whenever I had a drummer, they always wanted the like crazy time signatures and stuff. I was like, okay, that's not that's not
Right.
any style that ever resonated with me. I get why it resonates with them, but like to find people that are in the same page and also care as much as you is a very difficult thing, which is another element that does make that Reagan just mentioned very very rare.
He also said that he has never had a breakup.
My wife is that way too. I am my wife's one and only boyfriend to now husband, obviously, and to that I say, man, that's the best.
I
That's
mean, you're the
like,
best she's ever had. That I
yeah,
mean,
yeah, yeah. I don't know if that's a Vertical Horizon reference, but I hope it is. As a huge Vertical Horizon fan. Hashtag shout out to Vertical Horizon, my favorite artist, famously.
I actually,
But
to speaking of Vertical Horizon, I was actually listening to them before we came on tonight in honor of you because I was like, I
that's
love their
hilarious.
"Everything You Want" song. I
It is
mean, their song is
fantastic.
great.
It is fantastic. Actually, my favorite album is their next one after that, which is an unpopular opinion, but I love their Go album. It's my favorite album of all time. But yeah, man, if to everyone out there, if it's great
So
if you can be one and done. It's the only time where
yeah,
one and done is a good thing, right? One and done in sports is terrible. It means you went to the playoffs and you just got eliminated right away.
but
But
see if a smart songwriter was watching this, "One and Done" is a perfect
yeah, there
song
you go.
title.
Yeah,
That's a perfect song title, Paul Beckerman.
somebody just got added.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
Song titles are. Oh, that's right. That is what you were talking about when I cut out. We should
yeah.
revisit that real quick. Yeah,
Just
just
to hear, Car Chronicles shortened the channel title because of us. We're making an impact on the world,
uh,
Joseph.
yeah, you didn't have to do that. It just was surprising, I guess.
Mine is
You're so
actually
used to like the same like Giuseppe whatever 90210 and yours was a long but well articulated name.
um And my actual channel title is At Home Songwriting with Chad Shank, so
Yeah.
that's a long title too, so I don't think it matters, so
Yeah. Yeah, it doesn't.
so what were you gonna talk about song titles?
Yeah, well, more about because you were talking about how I forget the show you mentioned. It was this, I think,
Oh, yeah, 90 Day Fiancé.
yeah, okay. So, like, what you talked about there is a great takeaway, I think, for everybody else too. If they didn't think of it this way, I just wanna bring it back there. Just learning that it is a skill set to learn how to hear and listen and find ideas. Like,
Mhm.
because you can go throughout your day and have 20 people say something that's actually kind of interesting, but like you kind of need to hone that. You're always kind of listening for these things. Like, for example, you pointed out that I said a thing and you thought, oh, that could make a good song title. But if we go to the other extreme, somebody who's not a songwriter at all would probably never even think about that. But as a
Right.
songwriter, it's a good skill set to build up to just learn to be listening to those things. Because whether it's a TV show you're watching, like a a story I
Well,
like to tell is once it was like YouTube. It was late at night where you're just like watching random crap on YouTube, right? So for some reason, I think YouTube had a documentary about Paris Hilton or something. So that was the ad, right? And it was one of those annoying ads that's like 2.5 minutes. Sorry, YouTube. I know we're on YouTube and I'm angering the YouTube gods, but those ads are kind of the worst, right? But there was something that she said early on that actually caught my attention. I'm thinking like, oh, it's a Paris Hilton documentary. I'm gonna skip this ad as soon as I can. But she said she kind of had this like sad, distant look in her eyes and said, I don't remember what the things were, but it was like, oh, if I just get more money, then I'll be happy. If I just find the right man, then I'll be happy. I don't remember what the things were. But she had this recurring and then I'll be happy. And I thought that if that's not like the American tragedy right there of like this delusion that you're just one thing away from happy when happiness is kind of a fleeting thing anyway. I think you can have joy forever. I don't think happiness always comes and goes, right? I
yeah.
had a daughter, happy. If she got sick, sad, right? It's not that I'm not joyful. I love my daughter. She's the best thing that ever happened to
Yeah.
me.
Yeah,
But like
yeah.
happiness comes and goes. So this and then I'll be happy was just a thing where I wrote that in my idea document and I still haven't written a song off of it. But like, who knew Paris Hilton,
Totally.
of all people, dropping some insight that resulted in a song idea.
Well, as you were even telling your story about your breakup, you started off saying, for the first 3 days, I just cried and watched, um,
Everybody loves Raymond. Yeah.
Everybody Loves Raymond. Like, those are lyrics.
Yeah.
Like, all you
That's true.
literally have to do is take that and put it into, like, I was working at Panera Bread.
Yeah.
Like, those are lyrics.
That's true. That's true. Then maybe you can get a sponsorship from Panera because first song
Yeah.
ever that they're mentioned in, maybe.
But, like, look at so this comment here, by Car Chronicles, says, "Not a person who writes based on moods. Is that wrong? I often hear people say they write based on inspiration of what's going on in their life. Any thoughts?" We just talked about this in one of my other songwriting workshops. It's good to not have to be in a mood to write about it, right? But I do think you have to write about real emotions for other people to connect to it. So I think you have to be able to set a scene and you have to be able to set something in motion to put the listener in a certain feeling. And a lot of times, and people will argue on this, but I think it's true. I think music holds more emotion than lyrics do,
Mm.
because music hits us in the heart and lyrics hits us in the head. And I think the mood of your music is going to always trump the mood of your lyric.
Hmm.
Um,
I also have a lot of thoughts on this one. This is some good questions, man.
but what are your
So many
thoughts?
good questions. I know I'm trying to think how to make it not 30 minutes. But first, I don't think you're wrong. That's the short answer. And in
Duh.
fact, so yeah. So in fact, I would argue that it's dangerous and limiting if you do only write based on your moods and what's going on in your life. Just as an
Yeah.
example, you know, uh, frankly, for the most part, my life has been, and I think this is true for a lot of adults. Once you get married, y- th- there's not that much drama in your life, right? The biggest drama I have is I don't know. Once in a while, a friend says something that irritates me, but I'm kind of I know I don't seem chill, and I'm passionate, but I am chill about, like, I don't know, I don't get that upset about things that happen to me. So, like, I I I could never write another song about anything. There's just not that much happening in my life that is that
Yeah.
interesting for songs. So if I was limited to just what I was going through right now, I would be in big trouble. But instead, you
Yeah.
can reach back into your past and revisit that, right? So a song that I've been working on is actually kind of re-diving into a thing that happened in the past. I just found a different angle on it. Or the whole EP that I mentioned, did some vocals for today that I'm working on. That whole EP is sort of about, it's not about Alzheimer's, but that's kind of it's never even mentioned, but that's kind of at the heart of it's. The EP is called Keeping
Mm,
Memories, and there's kind of
cool.
two characters in it. I won't get too deep, but one of the characters is like an old man in his story. The TLDR version is in one song, it's implied that his wife has passed away and he's desperately trying to remember her. But because he has Alzheimer's, is the implied part, he's kind of forgetting and he's troubled by that fact. And then the next step is there's a bird and he saves it, and it's got this whole double meaning thing of like the bird is kind of representative of him because it's a bird with a broken wing, and he's an old guy who feels like the world's kind of cast him aside. It's a whole thing, whatever. And then the final song, he dies at the end of it, but it's the other character in the song and him talking, or the other character of the EP and him are now together in this
Hmm.
one song, which probably people won't even notice when the time comes, but for the record, that's it's meant to be sort of that. Where now it's the young man, maybe his son, maybe his grandson. I don't really get into that. At the end, it's revealed him keeping his father. We'll say his father. Him keeping his father's memories. So all of this is something that has never happened to me, right? But I did have a
Yeah.
grandfather pass away from Alzheimer's, so it's connected. It's something that I resonates with me because I
Yeah.
had actually multiple grandparents pass away. One was fast moving dementia, one was Alzheimer's, all within like 2 or 3 years. So even though I've never been an old man, even to start with, right? And the old man's kind of the main character of this whole EP. I'm still I can think about how would I feel if my wife passed away and I was losing memories of her. I can put myself in those shoes because I at
Yeah.
least have a wife. I know what it's like to love someone. So taking your experiences and being able to put yourself in other people's shoes just based on something where you understand the core emotions and you can sort of project out. So
Yeah. I say that you don't have to be factual to be true.
oh, for sure, for
So,
sure.
like, the emotion is still there, even if it's not like if the names and locations have been
Mhm.
changed, right?
Yeah.
Um,
It's kinda like any
uh,
parable, right? The goal of a parable
right,
is to
like a
Aesop's
fable.
fables or
Yeah,
any of
fables.
those sort of things. Or like the boy who cried wolf, right? Not a factual story, and yet
Right.
absolutely tells a core human truth, that is absolutely true about, like, if you keep saying something and it's not true, eventually nobody will listen, and then when it is true,
Yep.
the wolf will tear you apart,
I have to
metaphorically.
I have to comment on what Sunny put up here. She said, husband is having an affair with his guitar," and I wrote a song about it. Affair with a guitar drips of song ideas. Like,
Yeah,
that's
yeah, for
exactly
sure.
what we're talking about, Sunny.
Yeah.
Um, and then Orpheus says you need to have more children, and then you'd have more drama in your life.
Yeah, that's fair. Well, don't worry, Reagan. We will be working on that. But my
So
daughter is not quite 6 months old, so there'll be a little lull here.
so if I was gonna be writing a song, it would be like the emotion that I feel when DoorDash forgets my queso, right? Like, that's the
Yeah,
sad emotion in my life, but
yeah,
it hurts. It
yeah.
hurts.
And you can project that into something else, right? It can be like, and this
Right.
reminds me of this one time that this jerk broke my heart or something.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, even like paying attention to stories around you and trying to put yourself in that person's shoes, I think can go a long way. And also to the previous question, now that I've between the two of us, we've completely over answered it. Mostly my fault because I tend to go on and on.
It's
But
okay.
one of the a very short quote that at least has helped me, and maybe will help you too, is um, when there's a wave, ride it, and when there isn't, paddle. Usually, I have a more eloquent way of putting it, but basically, it's like in surfing, right? So always be doing the work, always be
Yep.
paddling, whether you're inspired or not. We shouldn't work only when we're inspired. and you're more likely to catch waves if you're actually out there paddling trying to catch a wave. So a lot of times you become inspired because you worked, not the other way around.
Yes.
But just in general, like see inspiration as an accelerant, where you're not your mood, your all that shouldn't dictate whether you're songwriting. It shouldn't dictate the work, but it is something that will absolutely accelerate it, right? So I might be songwriting every day for a month, and only the last 10 days I produced like 3 times as much as the first 20. But I probably never would have gotten to those days if I didn't work all 30 of them. So that, yeah, hopefully that's
There's
helpful
a
to Car Chronicles, the now shortened name.
yes, yes. Um, Orpheus says, missing DoorDash items is a low key tragedy every time. It is because you wait and you wait, and then they don't bring you your queso. It's tragic.
I've never door dashed in my life, so I would
Oh
not
my
know this
god.
pain.
Oh my god. I have DoorDash so many things, it's not even funny. Like dog food,
Oh,
medication from Walgreens,
wow.
groceries. Yeah, you
Man,
name it, I've DoorDashed it.
man,
Um,
it's a lot of tips.
Dory says she's done a lot of acting, and a lot of what we're talking about sounds like character
Mm,
development, putting oneself in a situation and reacting to it emotionally as one imagines what the character is actually going through.
absolutely.
Totally. Um, I mean, as songwriters, aren't we really just writing a script for the singer to sing?
Yeah, I think
Really?
so, and I think this is another thing. This is kind of a thing I've been on for a while. Is the things that for some reason only songwriters think that. So one thing is, I feel like if you talk to any other writer, they know that like writing is editing, and editing is very important. Songwriters are like the one community that seem to be like, oh, I don't want to edit. Like writing, but you're a writer. Like you have to edit. Well, have to is a strong word. If you want to maximize your results, editing is usually where that's going to happen. Would maybe be the more nuanced way of putting it. But also like no other creative gets away with like I only write from my perspective in the here and now. Can you imagine? I mean, that's called a Mary Sue if it's in a movie, right? I mean, there's more
Yeah.
to a Mary Sue, right? They have to be kind of perfect and like, okay, this isn't a real person. But like, we have derogatory terms for that when other artists do it, and I think rightfully so. But for some reason in songwriting, it's okay. And I'm not saying that like it's not the same, right? I do think it's worse if you can only write a book from your point of view. But like we're artists, right? So we a part of that is being able to kind of teach ourselves to put ourselves in other people's shoes, fast forward in our own lives to a theoretical life that we could, maybe your
So
marriage is great and you're like, okay, but what if it wasn't 5 years from now? I know it will suck for like 10 minutes when you're angry about it, but like it might result in a good song. So maybe it's worth it.
yeah.
But yeah.
I've heard that songwriters in Nashville, they wanna write with the people who are going through breakups.
Mm.
Like, if one of your co-writers is getting a divorce, that's the person you wanna write with because that's where all the stuff
Yeah.
comes out.
Yeah. I
Um,
believe that.
you said something and I totally just lost my train of thought on what you were talking about. You were talking about, whatever you just said sparked something that I was gonna comment on
That
about.
it's called Mary Sue's. If
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
novelists do it, we need to write from other perspectives.
Oh, the
Mm,
editing piece.
editing. Okay.
I think you can take like everything has its light and its shadow, right? So I think
Absolutely.
editing can also be your worst enemy if you never realize that you're polishing a turd.
Very true.
You know what
Yeah,
I mean? Like some
absolutely.
songs are not meant to be rewritten. Just write
Yeah,
a new effing song. Like
yeah,
you're not going to
yeah,
make a piece of crap into a bar of gold. Like you're just
yeah,
not.
yeah. I
But
I
you have
agree
to
completely, for sure.
yeah, but
Yeah,
I think you have to write enough. And
mhm.
Pat Pattison always says that, crap makes the best fertilizer, so you have to write a lot of crap to fertilize the good ideas.
Yeah.
Um, but but that's the thing is like I've seen people get trapped in this. I'm rewriting this same song that I've been writing for like 5 years, and it just gets worse. You know
Yeah,
what I mean? Like just write a new effing song,
yeah,
same
yeah,
topic, just change it.
yeah, and, so 2 things can be true at once, which is
Yes.
kinda similar to the shadow bright thing. It's not exactly the same, but it's kind of a similar idea where, like, for instance, uh, I talk a lot about how I think ideas are cheap. And what I mean by that is like you shouldn't get overcommitted. Like if you have an idea, cool. Like my goal is that I would never write a song without like 10 ideas before I narrow it down to one. So like
Yeah,
don't be so like, oh, I have an idea, I must develop it into a song. You can if the idea is really killer and you think immediately it's your best idea you've had in the last 6 months, sure, go ahead. But also like don't get over attached to ideas because an idea does not make a good song. But I do also think the other side of that is it's also true where sometimes people will overcommit to a song that the foundation it's built on wasn't even that good. So it's sort of like polishing a turd, but sort of from a different angle, right? Where it's like you
yeah,
started this song. This is kind of why I'm anti chord progression is maybe overstated, but I position myself sort of that way. Really, I'm anti just picking a stock chord progression. Um, Not for beginner songwriters, but for more seasoned ones. But really, that comes from to me. It's just it sets up yourself for failure a little more easily to me anyway if you start with a stock chord progression that like so the foundation of your song that you built your whole song off of is something by definition that's not interesting, right? And that can be fine. Great songs can be written that way, but to me it's like you're better off to the polishing a turd idea. You're better off finding an idea that really resonates with you, whether it's a sick song title or a cool little piano riff. This doesn't mean it needs to be complicated, right? Most of
right.
these things end up being simple, but just finding like a cool bass line that resonates with you or something like that, and then building the song off of that makes it less likely that you find yourself polishing a turd and more likely that, hey, this is a thing that can be made something good. Um, but which is not to say you can't start with chord progressions. Just like I guess for more seasoned songwriters, I would advise to be slower, to just be like, I'm going to do a 1 5 6 4. If you improvise and happen to make a song that's 1 5 6 4, I think that's fine. But like instead approach it like I'm going to write a cool bass line or a guitar chord progression that makes me feel something. If it happens to be
Yeah.
1 5 6 4, I think that's fine. Um, but
I think there again, it comes down to every part of your song has a job to do, right?
yeah,
Like, and I think we all start writing songs thinking that you start with chords and then you sing to them and then that's how you
mhm,
make a song.
yeah,
When the reality is like a lot of times your chords really are the support of the melody, right? And we talked about this in one of my other workshops where your song, like the lyrics are the lines, the melody is the actors, and then the chords are like
mhm,
the lighting, right? The
mhm,
chords color whatever else is going on.
sure.
But when you're first writing, there's nothing wrong with I call it the hum and strum, where you're just like
Mhm,
you're playing chords and you're singing. The
sure.
only issue is you will very quickly keep singing the same notes.
Yes. Mhm,
So your melodies get really boring.
yeah.
So
That and I
yeah, but
think just asking yourself to I think you mentioned this at the beginning, but retouching on the great idea, which I think you're totally right about, like, if you're asking yourself to play something that you just wrote, so you don't know it that well, so part of your brain's thinking about what you're playing, and you're asking yourself to improvise a melody, that's asking a lot of yourself, especially
yes,
with this new chord progression. So even something as simple as, like, record it on your phone, you repeating it for 3 minutes, or even
yep,
better if you do it on your computer, and then just sit there and improvise the melody with your voice. Or I'm a big proponent of writing melodies not with your voice, just because I realized after a while, like, oh, I write way better melodies with the piano. It's just, I think, a better tool for it. It doesn't have to be though, right? For some people,
yeah.
it might not be the right answer. But
But
learning to put themselves in a position to succeed is a thing that I think we all have to do for ourselves, right? Where in that example, the first 3 songs might be great, but song 4 or 5, they're just like, "I'm out of chord progressions, I'm out of melodies. How do people do this?" It's like, well, maybe
yep,
just doing something simple like writing a bass line with the low E string of your guitar and not thinking about the chords yet, that alone might be enough to be like, "Oh, I'm re-inspired again." Or starting with the
right.
melody, which I think you mentioned earlier.
Well, and the thing is if you use like the 1 5 6 4, right?
Mhm.
There's theory reasons why those chord progressions work and why people like
Yeah.
them because it's like home, away, home, away.
Mhm.
It's tension, release, tension, release. That means your song should not hang on that chord progression. You
Yeah.
need to have something that's more interesting than that.
Yeah.
Because a million songs have the same chord progression.
For
So you
sure.
have to try to, and here's the other thing too.
And there are only so many.
Nothing is original.
Yeah.
So if you're breaking your soul trying to find something that's never been done before, like it, you're not going to find it. You know what I mean? So don't even worry about that. Just make the best that you can. You know what I mean? Um, I'm reading a comment here from Trey Tosh. Let's see.
Yeah.
This is interesting one. Asking a lot of you, but some people are naturally gifted. It's natural.
Yeah.
You're narrow-minded and shouldn't be given any advice in songwriting. Some people might take your advice. So here's the thing. Nobody plops out of their mother knowing how to write a song.
Agreed.
So you're learning to do it somehow, right? So you're either learning it through listening, and whatever you listen to colors what you're doing, like language, right? Like we learn how to talk without taking any classes. We learn how to like respond to what people say. But if we want to learn how to read, someone has to teach us how to read, right? Like we don't naturally read. Also, yes, some people have the ability to write better than others and capture
Mhm.
what they're trying to say better than others, but people can also be taught. So the argument that people either have songwrite, they're either a good songwriter
Yeah.
or they're not is complete bullshit to me. And it
Agreed.
like it's
Yeah.
such a sad way to think if you think that
Yeah.
some people are just gifted and some people just aren't. Like
Yeah. And it's
it's
destructive to
completely
both
not true.
sides, right? It's on both sides, right? Because A, that's a
Yeah,
horrible thing to say to the people who might have more than enough talent, which might not even be that much talent, right? Because you can learn. It's a
yeah,
combination of like learn, hard work, and talent. And you don't need a ton of talent if you're going to have hard work. Now, if you have tons of talent, you need less hard work, but that doesn't mean you still won't be way better with hard work. So it's a destructive thing to say for all the people who like might deep down have imposter syndrome, right? Because those people are then going to be like, oh, I'm just not talented enough. And that's horrible. That's tragic because it's probably not true. It probably genuinely is not true for that person. It might be
right.
just like one piece of knowledge that will make something click for them. And then the other side is like, man, I think I talked about this recently, but to me, it is to no songwriter. I don't care whoever you think the greatest songwriter of all time is. If they said, I have nothing to learn, like that's arrogant, isn't it? Like that they couldn't get better.
100%.
I mean, like I think Christopher Nolan's at the top of his filmmaking game right now. But I think he totally missed on Tenet, and I think that he probably has things to learn. And he is making better movies more consistently, in my opinion, than almost any director before. There are other directors, don't get me wrong. He's just in that discussion to me. And but like, of course, he has something to learn. We all have something to learn. John Mayer has something to learn, and even like John Mayer has that attitude. I've seen interviews
Yeah.
recently where he talks about he still has so much to learn. He talks about how like every song something new. So it's just like it's not a productive attitude for yourself or for other people to have the attitude of, yeah, completely agreed, tater tat. Need to just make sure
Yes.
I said that right. um, but yeah, no, totally right. Where like it's a combination of work and like yeah, talent is a part of it. But I feel like anybody who says, "Oh well, it's just talent," or some of us are too talented to blah blah blah, you're almost definitely not. Because no, I don't think
It
anybody is. But also the people
no.
who say that are never like if John Mayer said that, I might be like, well, it's
Also,
pretty
I
good.
just
So if
I
anybody could say that, it would be somebody like him or the Beatles, even though I don't care for the Beatles. But like, it doesn't matter. Like I understand they are in the upper echelon. So if they
I
were
I
arrogant
don't
like
I
that,
don't I don't care I don't care for the Beatles either.
yeah,
I don't understand.
I
I
don't
think it's
either.
because they were the first for people when they were
Yeah,
young, and they were put on a pedestal, and like the
absolutely.
whole like invasion of them, like I think there's
Hmm.
more to it than the music. I don't think
For
it's just
sure.
the music.
That and like it becomes a self-fulfilling thing where like
It
once people buy the
100%.
premise that the Beatles are brilliant because they were told by culture over and over that they're brilliant. you then, when listening to their song, assume, well, they are brilliant, therefore this song must be brilliant. So it's this self-fulfilling prophecies,
Well,
right? I could say the same thing for myself for Taylor Swift, maybe, where like I don't like Taylor Swift. So it's probably gonna be harder for me to like objectively see a Taylor Swift song and be like, oh, that's okay.
but
I stand corrected.
here's
This is better than I give it credit for, just because I like
here's
already have it in my head.
right. And here's the thing too, like I get really angry at songwriters that call something bad because they don't like it.
Yeah, agreed.
You should be able to respect something even if you don't like it.
Yeah,
You know,
for
because
sure.
I hear people diss like other artists and like all of these things. Like I don't like the Beatles. I don't
Yeah,
like Bob Dylan.
yeah,
Like these are like
respect.
these songwriting gods that everybody,
Yeah,
rubs one off to all the time, and they think that like, but here's the deal, like, and I get so many messages from people on like YouTube and Facebook where they say
yeah.
like Dylan didn't need to be taught how to songwrite. Yes, he fucking did. Sorry,
Yeah.
I'm swearing.
Yeah. No, I
But
I'm right there with you with the passion about this. I'm
he
glad
went to
you're doing it for me.
like Dylan went to college.
Yeah.
Dylan stole African American spirituals to write some of his
Yeah.
songs. His melodies are not original.
Yeah.
Dylan also borrowed lyrics. Like
Yeah.
he's not some god. You have made
Yeah.
him be that way.
Yeah. That and like I hate the argument, and we might have talked about this, but I most often hear this argument. Sorry for everybody in the comments that is like, why are they getting negative now because of one comment? We'll get back. But just because like this is a thing that I see over and over that just really irritates me.
Yes.
Partially, this whole thing irritates me just because it's one of those great ironies where like the person calling you arrogant is the person who's claiming they're too talented to learn anything. It's like that
Right.
is by definition the arrogant opinion here. My opinion that everybody should learn, and I'm also learning, and I'm not. I don't go out there and say I'm a great songwriter. I have strong opinions, but like for me,
Yeah.
it's like, no, I am a songwriter at home. I'm passionate about the craft. I hope I become a better songwriter every day, or at least every year. And I certainly, when listening back, I have grown a lot. But it's not about me. It's about I've learned some things along the way. You've learned things along the way. We want to share those things. We're not here because we
100%.
think we're great. We're here because we know the pain points that people go through, and we want to help them through that. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. But the music, this is the thing I hear about music theory all the time, specifically, where people are like, oh, insert great artist here, didn't know music theory, which beyond the, you don't know that, right? Even if they
Right.
claim they don't know music theory, you don't know that. But also that may be true. But let's assume, I don't buy the premise that the Beatles are brilliant. I just reject that premise. Like you can like them or whatever, but I just reject the like they're clearly the best band ever. It's like, I don't know. They're the most popular band ever. I get why they were popular, but like
Right.
this unanimous greatest band ever, like no, at some point it just became a cultural phenomenon, and that's a part of it. And again, I'm not saying they're not great. I'm
Yeah.
just saying greatest of all time, to declare one band that to me always seems like, come on, guys. But anyway, let's assume they didn't know music theory. When you say, well, great artist X didn't know music theory, therefore I don't have to learn music theory. There's many assumptions in there that are all incredibly dangerous, if not ridiculous. One is
Yeah.
you're assuming that they wouldn't be even better if they did learn that, right? So it might be true that they didn't know anything about a certain element of lyric writing or whatever, but what you're forgetting is they might have been even better. It's like I compare it to like an NFL player. There are some NFL players or NBA players that were so astronomically talented that they were able to make the NBA or NFL and even be a very good player. Say Shaq. Shaq is one of the greatest of all time. Not because he took care of his body, famously, not because he practiced his free throws, but
Yeah.
if you say, I don't have to practice my free throws because Shaq didn't, well, Shaq is like 7 foot a million. He's massive. He's strong. He's fast. He's a god amongst men. Okay. So he could get away with that,
Yep.
but he would be even better. He might be the greatest of all time instead of Michael Jordan right now if he practices free throws, if he's ate better. So the argument of like, oh, well, this artist didn't know music theory, so I don't have to either. First of all, the implication is that you're just as talented as, say, let's say it's the Beatles that they're saying.
Yeah.
So you're
Yeah.
saying you're just as talented as the Beatles, and you're also, because it may be true that they had enough talent that they didn't have to learn as much to be great, but you also are forgetting they might have been even better if they did learn this thing. And I don't know what this, I know this is a long rant now, but like, I just don't understand, like, what do people think the conspiracy is around music theory? Like, I don't sell music theory. Music theory is a thing out there. You can learn it. You can get a textbook. You can take a class. It's not the
So
same as me saying I have this secret nobody else has. No, I'm telling you, like, hey, music theory for me, I can honestly say the biggest thing that helped my songwriting in 15 years of, like, I started maybe 20 years. The biggest moment for me was taking a music theory class in high school. And people can take or leave that, but that is true for me, where like it immediately made it so I was much more efficient at writing music. You cannot learn music theory. You cannot want to learn music theory. That's totally fine. But like this idea that, oh, I'm going to make excuses because some random artist that I like didn't know music theory, allegedly, is just one of those silly arguments I see over and over where it's like, that's not the question. The question is, would you become a
it,
better songwriter if you
it,
learned some music theory? That's
it's
the right
like
question.
it's like a writer saying like, I don't need grammar.
Yes. It
Like
is. Yes,
like like,
exactly.
screw grammar, like, I'm just like,
Yeah.
punctuation, screw it. I'm
Yeah,
not using
words.
it.
Yeah.
Words, letters, it's
Yeah,
like
it's so
letters.
silly. Yeah. Yeah. I I'm so glad we're having this conversation because it drives me absolutely crazy, and I think people sometimes misunderstand, because sometimes I get hot about this, and it's not that I'm mad at the
Yeah,
person. The people I'm actually most mad at are the people that I think lied to people and said, like,
ye
"Oh, to songwrite, all you have to do is this, this, and this, and it will just all work." Those people lied to you. Songwriting is not that's I mean, you can write a song and it not be that complicated, right? You can.
100%.
You could just pick a chord progression, improvise a melody, write some lyrics that work, and that's fine. But like then when you listen back and you're like, I'm just not, I feel like this isn't as good as the artist I listened to. You're right, because it's not, because you did the bare minimum, because somebody lied to you and said that, like, oh, it's just talent, or oh, it's like, no, like learning is a huge part of this. Like I am still constantly learning 15 years later, and John Mayer's still learning, right? I mean, he talks about him learning
Ye
still, and it's John Mayer. Again, whether you like him or not, the dude is like
but,
hugely popular. So like he
also
doesn't need to, but he still does.
also, even blind squirrels find nuts, right? Like, I saw an interview with Paul Simon, and they asked him, "When you
Yeah.
wrote Bridge Over Troubled Water, did you know it would be what it has become?" And he's like, I thought it was pretty good." He's like, "I thought it was a little bit better than other things I've written, but did I know
Yeah.
what it was going to become? No." So nobody
Yeah.
effing knows. So, like,
Yeah.
the thing about teaching songwriting is,
Yeah.
number 1, there's a million ways to do it. I have opinions
Mhm.
on it. Joseph has opinions on it. You all have opinions on it. None of it, when it
Yeah.
comes down to it, none of us know squat. And the
Yeah.
people who are taking your money saying, "I know all these secrets," are just taking your money. Like, it's like
Yeah.
music theory. It's theory. Like, it doesn't say
Yeah.
this is music fact. This is
Yeah.
how people put it
It's a
together.
helpful tool.
Right.
Yeah.
Everything's a tool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. Which is not to say that, like, to me, the only thing I have issue with, right? There's an element to anytime somebody, like, we'll go to software development.
Yeah.
I've been doing that for 8 years. So my value is I've done 8 years of experience. So the new kid coming out of college, the probability that I can help that person come along more quickly is high because
Yeah.
I've been through the first year and the second year and the third year. And the same thing's true with songwriting, right? So it's sort of like the big brother thing of the thing that those of us on songwriting YouTube can offer is not a secret per se. It's a, I learned this the hard way over 8 years. I can in one
Right.
video, right? You
Right.
don't have to deal with the like, I did it wrong for 5 years. Like I tried to do lyrics first for the longest time. And I'm not saying lyrics first is wrong, but from my experience, I found that it's way better for me. I found it way more helpful to start with things like a piano riff or whatever, and
So
lyrics last. I can still get the lyrics right. So that may be true for some people and not true for others, but the value is just that, like, we've been through the hard stuff so that we can accelerate that. Really, what bothers me though is the, like, how to write a hit song is like the
Oh,
thing where
yes,
it's
yeah.
like
So
I've almost made a video called "How to Write a Hit Song" just because I know like SEO will love it, and then
yeah.
do the whole like I forget what the quote is, but basically where I would turn it around in the video and explain
Yeah,
how nobody can tell them how to write a hit song. So
yeah.
it just feels a little it always feels sleazy to me when people advertise that
So
they can
so
tell
here's
people how to
here's
write a hit song
so
is like
here's
the
here's
thing.
here's the thing. Here's the thing.
Yeah.
I think people's process, I think people's thoughts, I
Yep.
think people's ways of doing things have value. So I'm not saying you should never pay for things. I have
Yeah.
classes online you can pay for. Joseph has
Yeah.
stuff you can pay for. I
Mhm.
teach for Berklee College of Music. Everything we teach at Berkeley is the curriculum that the school has put together over the years by working with some experts in the field, and really everything is just a perspective. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like it's all, do you want the perspective? But I never say I will teach you how to write a hit song, because number
Yeah.
one, I've never written a hit song.
Yeah, and even the people who have, they have songs that aren't hits, which means they clearly
Yes.
don't know the formula either, unless Taylor Swift intentionally didn't write a hit that time, right?
Also,
Even those people don't really know, and a part of it too is like, well, you need a record company behind you. That's how you write a hit song.
but if
Nobody
you
wants to
could
talk about
but
that
if
part,
you
but
but if
yeah,
you really had the secret to writing hit songs, and like literally they could make, whoever is sitting wherever they are
yeah,
write a hit song, why are they selling courses instead of just writing hit
hit
songs?
songs. Yeah, exactly,
Do you know what I
exactly.
mean?
I agree.
Like,
No,
I
I
think it's
agree
I think
completely.
it's different if you're taking, like, lessons.
Yeah.
Like, I look at, like, college courses, that's like a lesson. I think what you do is
Mhm.
like a lesson.
Yeah.
What I do for my coaching clients, I
Mhm.
do, one-on-one coaching sessions, I do email critiques.
Mhm.
Those are, you're hiring me to provide my feedback, right? It's
Yeah,
like there's value in that, and
for sure.
hopefully it helps you, but everybody has the ability to decide, do I connect with who's teaching,
Yeah.
right?
I mean, it's just like when you take guitar lessons, you're not
Totally.
getting John Mayer, right? Like, you're
Right.
getting somebody who is a pretty good guitarist and is ahead of you, which is all that matters, right? And ahead just meaning like they have more years experience. So that means they have something to offer. They know they've been through they know now, oh, I wish I learned this sooner, or wow, I didn't realize
Yep.
scales were so helpful. So they can help accelerate you in a way that other people can't. But also to address yeah, I mostly agree on the, like, anytime somebody presents themselves as a guru, it's just one of those interesting things, like, yeah, completely agreed, tater tat,
Yeah.
100%, which is why I never understand how people get away with that. But, like, guru is an interesting thing. Do people actually out there call themselves a guru? Because that seems just super unbecoming to me. I can't even imagine. Like, even jokingly, it would be hard for me to say those words, like, "Oh, I'm a guru guy." Like, I can't even say it with
Like,
a straight face. It's so ridiculous. But, like, yeah. I think what's interesting, though, is we're getting into that weird place where, like, there were so many bad gurus in a lot of spaces that now people will, like, be a little too suspicious right away, where it's like, I there's just some people, right? You have commenters on videos. There's sometimes where it's like, dude, like, I don't know, this is a free video. I have
uh,
271 free videos. I don't understand what you think the scam is. At the time, I didn't even have ads running on the videos. So it's like, what do you
right,
think my play is here? Like, I,
right.
I, I don't understand. But
And it's like,
yeah.
what, like, do you want my, like, $30 a month I make from, like, YouTube monetization? Like, be
Yeah.
quiet.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Well,
Man, that hits home's Car Chronicles. I'm
yeah,
glad
that's
I'm glad to see that
awesome.
message now as we admittedly probably got a little derailed there, but
You know
yeah,
what, though? It's funny 'cause, I know some other pretty well-known, like, songwriting instructors through Berkeley and working with
yeah,
them, and they get the criticism too. I just think there's a lot
I'm
of
sure.
bitter people out there that think that you can't
Absolutely.
learn anything, you
Yeah.
just, you either have it or you don't, and it's like, I bet you if we could sit any successful songwriter down and say, "Were you born with this skill?"
Yeah,
They
they'd say
would
no.
laugh.
Yeah,
They would
yeah,
laugh. Yeah.
yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's also one of those crazy things, like, to me, like, you it's a, like, tell me you don't understand creativity without telling me you don't understand creativity. If you just are
Right.
focusing on talent, you clearly don't understand at all, because talent is a part of everything, right? I'll sometimes say there was a 0% chance I would ever make the NBA. I'm 5'7", right?
Yeah.
0% chance. And I was like athletic enough to be like on a small high school sports team, right? So like talent can be limiting to a degree, especially in some fields like athletics. But for very few people is talent the thing that really is capping you. It's usually just the learning, putting in the work, and and I don't know. It's just sad to me when like because sometimes you do get comments or emails where it sounds like people are so discouraged, but I think it's because they've been sold this lie about like, oh, and I think a part of it too is like we glorify the stories of like this brilliant songwriter who, like John Denver. I like John Denver a lot. But the
Yeah.
main story you hear that I've ever heard about John Denver and songwriting is how he wrote Annie's song in 15 minutes on a ski lift. Now, so everybody hears that, right? And they're like,
Yep.
that's what songwriting is. It's like, no, no, no. That was his one song that he had the magic. And we, at some
Yeah.
point, you may be lucky and you have that one song. For me, the at 3 days of Everybody Loves Raymond and Crying, I did have a song that I wrote like this. I kind of had this line, won't be tonight, about like that someday something will be all right, but it won't be tonight. It's sort of a response to sometimes like if somebody dies in your life or something bad happens in your life, some people are too quick to be like, oh, someday it will be okay. Like, yeah, but it's not right now. She broke up with me yesterday. Like, how about we not
Right.
fast forward? So it's kind of birthed in that. But like, it was a thing where I had the right moment, and but that is the one song I have ever written that was like 45 minutes from almost start to finish, and it at the time was my best song. But since then, I've wow,
Roten.
written, written, says the writer. Uh, but I've written like at least 10, 15 songs that I would definitely say are absolutely better. And none of them were that story. They were all like, it took 6 months. Some of them took years because I kind of just put it aside because I was like, maybe this song just isn't meant to work. But really, I just need a few more life experiences. And then I figured out what the song needed to be about. So like, anyway, for
I
everybody
think
out there, don't get down on yourself about, and don't listen to those like
no.
talent obsessed people where those people are usually lying too, where it's like, dude, you're not John Mayer. So you're over here talking about like being more talented than everybody else with your like 20 people that listen to your music, which doesn't mean that you're not the greatest. Obviously, great and popular are not the same, but yeah.
Absolutely. Um, like, and Sonny has a point here. Song structure is the base for writing a good song. Anyone can learn that.
Mm,
Absolutely.
for
And
sure.
what is a good song, right? Like that's a
Yeah.
very subjective
It
thing. Like
depends.
it it means something different for everybody, right?
Yeah.
Like there are some musicians that I don't
Hmm.
like the Beatles, like Bob Dylan.
Yeah. Yeah.
I keep going back to that because those are usually the fans that are the most vicious when it comes to this
Oh,
stuff.
for sure.
Um,
Legitimately, I've thought about doing an anti-Beatles video, and I'm like, I don't know, I might lose
but
half my audience.
here's the thing. Here's the thing.
Yeah.
Do you think we care less than Paul McCartney, or do you think Paul McCartney cares more about his work than we care about our own? Like,
Oh,
shut
yeah, yeah,
up. Like,
yeah,
before you criticize
yeah,
another songwriter, you need to take a few seats,
yeah,
right? Like,
sure.
we're all on this creative journey and we're all trying to do a little bit better than we did before. Does that mean we're all at the same level? No. What did Orpheus say here?
Yeah. It's
VeggieTale
hilarious.
is one of the best songwriting tips of all kind. Creating the word wronger so it rhyme was stronger. It had to rhyme.
I love how clear he's, trolling me in that one. I'm honored that he knows me that well already, that he's trying to troll me in the comments,
Yeah.
because he knows my, and I feel like I got some people thought I'm, like, anti-rhyming. I'm not. I'm just anti-forcing a rhyme, which I believe you are as well. I think we talked about that, but,
Yeah.
uh, yeah, it's just it yeah, I don't know. There's just so much to say
Same
about
story.
the people that it just disheartens me because I feel like the people a lot of times the people that have a lot of potential and the people that most need to be built up are the people that are going to see or hear the people that are like, "Oh, you're just not talented enough,"
Yep.
and not right. And that breaks my heart partially because they're the person who's not being arrogant, and they're like, it's one of those things, right? Where like you need confidence, but like the great irony is a lot of people who could be really great. They're dealing with imposter syndrome,
Y-
and the fact that they're a decent person that might be out there songwriting, and then people are like discouraging them away because they're saying like, "Oh, it's all about talent." Is just like a thing that like angers me on the inside greatly. Also, because I feel like we've all been there too, right? Where like
Yeah.
something just didn't. Actually, even in software, this happened for me, where like I was kind of a person that I went into my first day of college. I had never written a line of code in my life. A lot of people had taken coding in high school and did it for fun. So I was behind right away. And for me, like I spent the first probably 3 years of my career feeling like, man, this is the first time in my life that because I was a nerd in school, I was good at school, I was salutatorian type, always the top or second in the class. So I was used to like feeling like, oh, I'm pretty, not in an arrogant way. Just like for me, like average was a wow, what? No, I'm average at sports maybe, but not at like an academic thing. But
Hmm.
like, so when I got to the real world and I realized, man, I'm like a above average coder for the first like 3 years or whatever. It took me a little while, and some people it clicked right away. But for me, I really started blossom in my software writing skills somewhere around like year 3, 4 is where it really started to click for me. And that's the same thing is going to be true for all creativity, right? There are
Yeah.
people here that maybe will watch one of your videos, and that will be enough where already like their first song is actually pretty good. But then there's going to be other people that maybe it will take 3 years of they aren't producing great stuff, but that doesn't mean they don't have talent. It might just not have clicked yet, and if they keep with it, it will eventually work for them. Or maybe they just need
Right.
like the right tip or the right course to take or whatever that like makes sense to them. Because the process for everybody is going to be different too. I think there's value from learning processes from people like you and I who have tried a bunch and we figured out what works
Right.
best for us. But a process like, for example, for some people, maybe it really is the best way to write songs for them to start with lyrics. I tend to agree with you that it's harder to write an interesting melody when you start with lyrics. I agree with that completely. But that's not necessarily universal, right? There might be people
Yeah.
where they hear the melody in the words. That might be a real thing. I don't personally really resonate with that. I do a little bit, but I find that my melodies tend to be more safe when they come from words, whereas my melodies that I come up with on a piano will have bigger leaps and more interesting movement. But you know, you know,
But I think that's the thing, right? Like, I don't think you have to label yourself as this is how I write songs
for sure.
because I think it's going to change. Like, how I write
Oh, for
songs has
sure.
changed tons over the years.
Mhm.
I went to Berkeley, so I studied like, and that stuff really resonates with me. So the way Berkeley teaches and the way that I think about songwriting is very much in sort of that same, Pat Pattison, Andrea
Yep.
Stolpe, Shane Adams, like,
Mhm.
and now I teach Pat's class. I teach lyric writing.
Mhm.
Do I think that's the only way to think about it? No, but for me
Yeah.
personally and for other people, I think it really has improved my writing because I look at it from a different perspective. And I also think that as songwriters, when we get to the point where we look back at songs that we've written before and we gag, that means we've
Yes,
grown.
for sure.
That means you have grown, and the
Yeah.
thing about songwriting improvement is it doesn't happen overnight. Like, you don't instantly think like, "I'm there," right? Like, it just
Sure,
doesn't do it. What Sunny says, "Yeah, do a one-week challenge with Chad, and you do some haul ass songwriting." Yep.
yeah, and, uh, c crap, I just lost the yeah, and I lost it again
I
about
talked
the
about
songwriting
gagging.
process. Well, before before that, that's what distracted me. The, uh I don't know. I guess it wasn't that important, but whatever I was about to add. Um, yeah. I feel like I'm just slightly trying to read the comments at the same time, but they're
Yeah.
small on my screen. Your lips. Oh my goodness! Tater Tat is pays attention to my channel at least a little bit because
Is that
oh,
the lipstick
I'm
stains lyric?
yeah, I make fun of that one a lot, just because I think it's a good example of many things I talk about. I maintain that that song is one of the just weakest lyrics I've ever seen, and it drives me kind of crazy. But it just way over rhymes. I mean, it rhymes lipstick stains with brains. It talks about the way that you can cut a rug makes like the way you can cut a rug, and I'm so thug, and it just I mean, like, legitimately, like, people wouldn't believe it if they didn't read it type thing, but, like,
Yeah.
everybody loved that song back in the day. People didn't even
Yep.
notice, but I was the guy lit in the car like, "Oh, this is so terrible," like,
I didn't like that song. I didn't.
I didn't
Sunny
either.
says we're a good team. Thanks, Sunny.
Oh, feels good, feels good.
Um,
I like to think so too, just because, I think we have, like, a good mix of, like, a Venn diagram of we agree on a lot of stuff, but we
yeah.
also definitely have things that we don't agree on, which is helpful, right? Because then you see it, a different
Oh,
perspective.
yeah. I mean, there's some videos that you've done that I'm like, no, I don't agree with that.
Yeah,
But at the same time,
I was
like,
gonna
I
happen.
still watch your videos. Like,
Yeah, you can watch somebody you disagree with? What?
surprisingly.
Yeah, I always find it funny when, like, people, like, leave angry comments for a thing they disagree with, and it's like, make your own video? Like, I don't know what
Or
to tell you, like,
or do you ever
nobody
do
who would get value from me or you is ever gonna agree with everything we say, and in fact, they should be suspicious if they do. There's gonna be some things that I say that they're gonna be like, "I think he's wrong." There's gonna be some things you say where they're like, "Maybe he's not wrong, but it doesn't work for me." That is always gonna be a thing
um,
for
what
sure, Tater
Tater
Tat.
Tat
Yeah.
just said. Tater Tat originally said, remembered hating music he wrote in the past, but then he went back, or they went back. I don't know the gender.
Yeah.
And listened to the songs again and realized it was good all along.
Yeah.
Yeah, sometimes you overthink it. And what you just
Mhm.
said right here is you were comparing it to other things at the time.
Yeah.
And I have heard so many people say that comparison is the thief
Thief of
of joy.
joy. Yeah.
Yes. And
Yeah.
I
True.
think that is so true. And even Car Chronicles is saying, yes, comparison is the enemy.
Even comparing to yourself can be the enemy, 'cause
Yes.
and look, I'll be transparent about this, 'cause some people ask.
Yeah.
I did a whole album with the band I had in college, and if people ever went to my YouTube channel to look, they may notice like, "Huh, he seems to have, like, 3 songs up here. That's not a full album." That are like I say, like, this is from the band Highland, so it's hopefully clear, like, I was a songwriter, I'm singing and all that, but besides like we recorded that in a dorm, right? We recorded vocals all wrong, so we didn't get the
Yep.
best vocal takes. There's a ton wrong with that. But some of those songs, I have them on my computer right now, and I have not uploaded them because compared to my current standards, I'm like, I don't want to upload this, and people think this is what I wrote at 18, and I'm embarrassed by it now. We all have that feeling, right? And the good side of that is, hey, it shows how much you've grown. That like I don't even want to admit some of the stuff from then. Um, but at the same time, like a comparison to even yourself can be destructive because I find too that some people try, and I've been in this trap too. So this isn't I'm not judging anybody. It's a destructive trap where like you write a great song and you're like, wow, I nailed it, and then
Yep.
you force yourself to one up that song, like you are not going to be able to do that every time. I don't think I've ever once written 2 songs in a row where I wrote the best song I ever wrote and then wrote the best song I ever wrote again. I
Right.
don't think I've ever had that. It's usually like once a year or once every 2 years, I will finally write a song that beats whatever my previous best was, which shows I'm still trending up. But
So
like it's very rarely will you get like a one up, one up, one up. Don't ask yourself to do that. You will be very sad, miserable, and think you're bad when you're crushing it. You're crushing it. So
so
don't worry about it.
Pat Pattison says that 90% of what you write isn't gonna be your best 10%.
Yeah.
So, like, if you wanna have more top 10% songs, you have to write more 90%.
Mm,
So you have to learn to live in your own mediocrity and then
Mm.
some songs will bubble up. Like, I don't think it's a you're gonna do it on command, because it's
Yeah.
not like that. It's not a this input equals this output.
Mhm.
It songwriting and creativity is not what worked last song isn't gonna work this song.
Yeah.
There's a few
Yeah.
things in the chat. Somebody said, "Why can't they see all of the chat users?" So we're actually simulcasting this on multiple YouTube channels, and I think it's
Mhm.
on my At Home Songwriting Facebook channel. So
Mm.
some comments are coming into all of us, or coming into us, but you won't see it on your page, if that makes sense. So not everybody's on the same page.
Yeah.
Um, I want to go back here to Orpheus though. I actually wanted to bring this up because I think this is a hot topic. What
Yeah.
role do you think AI should play, if any, when it comes to songwriting today? And when will AI eventually replace songwriters? So I personally use ChatGPT to take my free writing, and I will tell it to break my free writing into
Mm.
potential song lines, and it will pull all the phrases out and put them in vertical order. So I don't
Mm.
have to do that manually anymore.
Huh. Interesting.
Um, so I use it to do that. I'll also use it to, like, if I um take like a website and like I'll put the text in there, and I'll say spit out potential pop song titles.
Mm.
And then it will read whatever text I put into it, and it will spit out titles from that. You can't copyright titles, so it's a great way to sort of build up uh sort of like words and titles that you can use. So I use it that way. I don't use it to write songs, because I think what AI writes
Yeah.
is cheesy AF right
Oh, for
now.
sure. I mean, by nature it will be, right? Because it's gonna be
Right,
taking the most it's gonna take all of the songs and say what's most common to all of them. So, like, by nature, it's gonna be cliche,
right.
and maybe someday it will be better. But also, like, to touch on the second part of the question, I don't think it ever will. I think a lot of things will take the same path with AI. There will be a lot of people that will get to prominence in any given field because AI they leveraged AI before other people learned to leverage it, right? So they're
Mhm.
like, for example, we might get some famous artists who are AI artists who literally just know how to put in prompts that get great art. But eventually, or blog posts, right? There'll be
Yep,
certain websites that explode because they'll be like, "Oh, we can just have blog posts like this." But then there will be a reaction to that, which will be that people will notice when it's like, "This is written by a robot. It's soulless."
yep,
And then I think it will be one of those where, like, there's a brief moment where everybody panics. Songwriters will be gone forever. There's no value anymore. There will be no art. We won't be able to tell the difference. And then I think there'll just be a response to that, and it will just end up being a blip in the radar. Not like AI. I think is going to change the world as we know it, but I don't think it will change the creative world as we know it long term. I think it will probably be uh, I noticed that AI is bad at making something sound authentic. Yeah, for sure. I asked ChatGPT to write punk lyrics, and the result was, "Hello, fellow kids. Can I take Susie Poo to the prom?
yeah, like,
Uh, driving my I don't know what car is punk. Mustang, maybe. I
so
don't know.
some things that I've used it for too is, like, if I wanna find words, like,
Yeah,
just words, like, say, like, I'm writing a song about, I don't know, we'll use breakup. I always breakup as the example, right?
yeah.
I
It's
don't
an easy
really
one.
write all breakup songs, but
I don't either.
let's say you have a word, like, let's say your song is like, "Give me 50 words related to a breakup," right? And it's gonna spit out 50 words that are related to a breakup.
Yep.
That to me is not Chat GPT writing your song, right? That's
Yeah,
the
for sure.
equivalent of like an electronic dictionary or a
We're
thesaurus
going
or
to
rhyming dictionary,
relatedwords.org,
like
which I'm a big fan of, actually.
what?
We're going to
What?
relatedwords.org, which I'm actually a big fan of. I like that website quite a
Oh,
lot.
totally, I love that site.
Yeah.
I had that
Yeah,
in
it's
one of
just
my
like a
videos.
supplementary tool, right? It's more like a
Right.
idea generation tool than it is. Yeah, I actually did a video on this, and I think it lands in the same place as well, where it's like it can be, if you know how to use it, it can be a really helpful tool for generating ideas, or like giving you an idea of, like you mentioned, take my writing and give me an example of a lyric that maybe could come of this. And maybe that
Right.
prompts it, where it's like everything's garbage except the first verse actually starts with a story that I wasn't thinking about starting with, or took
Yeah.
it in a different direction that I didn't see. Or maybe there's like two words that it chose to use where like, ooh, those are great verbs that I wouldn't have
Yep.
thought to use. But yeah, I think it's mostly going to be supplementary. Not to mention, like, I don't know, if you just wrote a song via Chat GPT, it's not too. I think it was Car Chronicles that said this. Forgive me if I'm wrong about that, but um, it's not your song, right? Like it
It's
isn't
not.
your song. Legally, it is, but artistically, it's not. I'd connect this to. I have this whole thing about like legally, Disney can make whatever it wants and slap Star Wars on it. Creatively, Star Wars is George Lucas's. So if George Lucas wouldn't approve, as far as I'm concerned, it's not Star Wars. It doesn't matter to me that they legally have the right to, they can
Yeah,
legally do
yeah, yeah.
whatever they want. They can say, just kidding, Luke Skywalker wasn't even real. But like, to me, it's about the creator. So so it's kind of that separation, right? Of legal and creative. Where like
Okay.
legally, maybe a Chat GPT song you could copyright. But creatively, is it really yours? I would say no, and
Right.
I think that just will be soul crushing, right? Some people will do that if they really hate writing lyrics, but I think for most people, they'll be like, ah, "It's not even my
Now
song. This sucks."
now the part of
Fun.
AI that I have been using,
Mm,
not ChatGPT, but is using the AI vocal replacement to turn my
yeah,
voice into like a female voice. So
yeah,
like if I'm writing a song and I want a female to sing it, it can take my vocal track and turn it into a female. I also have used
very impressive.
Synthesizer V, which Synthesizer V is where you can play a melody on a MIDI instrument and then you go in and you type lyrics on it and the computer sings it. So it literally will sing what you type into. Now, to me, that's just another tool. It's like a digital session singer, right? And some people will be against that.
Yeah,
But for me, if I want to have a female sing my song outside, like if it's 3 a.m. on a Saturday night, I don't know many demo singers
yeah,
that are going to come over at 3 a.m.
yeah,
for not very much money
yeah,
to sing my song that I'm not even gonna, like, market, right? So
yeah,
for me, it's like
yeah,
it's a tool for just to have fun with it.
yeah.
Now, like you said, there's gonna be some AI artist, somebody's gonna create a song
Hmm.
with a singer that doesn't exist.
Yep.
They're gonna use
Maybe even a whole band.
a whole band
Right?
that doesn't
Like, the
exist.
next evolution of the Gorillas or whatever, where I think this might be wrong because I saw them on stage and I'm like, "Oh, I thought nobody knew who these people were." Maybe I'm just thinking of the wrong band, but I thought it was the Gorillas, where for the longest time they just used their avatars, so nobody knew what they were. Maybe I'm
Yep.
wrong about that. Maybe it's another
They
band.
did.
Forgive
I
me.
think they did.
Okay, because I saw them live and I'm like, "Wait a second. I thought it was just all avatars before," but it was a more recent. Anyway, it doesn't matter. But like the next evolution of that might be that it's a whole artist that literally the artist does not exist, where it's just like
Correct.
that singer you're hearing is not a real person. I'm sure that will be a thing for sure.
And you'll still and the art they'll still be able to do tours because 'cause they'll just play it on big screens or they'll have holograms and, like,
Yeah. Yeah.
labels will
With an
love it.
avatar.
Labels will love it because they won't
Oh
have to pay
yes.
real people. They'll you know?
Yeah. Actually, yeah, that's an interesting point. I think pop music has way more to fear with that than anything else.
Yes.
And I think that for multiple reasons. One, I'm of the opinion that in the pop world, the best song doesn't rise. It's more like the song that happens to be on the table, that happens to fit with the producer who's looking at it, that happens to tickle their fancy that day. And guess what? You got lucky. That was Dua Lipa's producer. So it's gonna be a hit because it's Dua Lipa that sang it.
Right.
And maybe I'm overly negative about that, but like it's an industry, right? So to me, in pop music, it's never really been about, especially on the lyrical side, being that good. Uh,
Yes.
Sometimes production, usually the production is elite. The singer's really good. That stuff is usually really, really good. But the lyrics have always been like, always is a strong word, but especially the last 10 years are like, honestly, they're not that
But
much better than Chat GPT, in my opinion.
oh,
So
yeah,
those
yeah, yeah.
people maybe should be afraid, the people who are like only writing for pop singers. But for like the regular people, most of us want something real. I'll use NF as an example. A lot of why NF became so popular is because the concept of just being real resonated with people. Because
Yeah.
everybody's sick of like the hyper produced, hyper perfected celebrity singer or whatever. And NF's just like, dude, I'm gonna be real with you, right? I'm gonna talk about tough stuff. I'm gonna do my thing.
Yeah.
And that resonated with people because it was real. And in today's world with all the artificial stuff, I think everybody's always going to strive for real because humans need connection, right? And you and I can connect because we're talking, or we can connect through music and a song that we write. We're not going to
Right.
connect through some like artificial. And again, I'm a software developer, right? Just as a little context, of all people that usually are like ultra buy-in, like, oh, it's gonna change the world, guys, because it's always self-serving, right? I'm a
Yeah.
software developer, and I think like it's overstated. It'll be fine. It will probably get rid of some jobs eventually, and then new jobs will replace them, so it will be fine. Those people will have something else to do.
Yeah.
It's not like, the whole world's gonna change overnight, but
So
yeah.
back in the day, people thought being able to record music was going to kill the music industry because
Mm.
the music industry was all selling sheet music.
Yes. That's so funny.
So did it kill sheet music the way that it used to be? Kinda,
Yeah.
but the people who were selling the sheet music all of a sudden became record labels and
Mm.
made a crap ton of money anyway. It's like you have to
Yeah.
adapt.
And then there's auto-tune, and then there's the era of people don't buy music anymore, and we've survived all that, right?
Right.
Now instead music is like your advertisement to get people to then like buy your merch or go to your concerts. It used to be they put out an album, they made money on the album, which is why the Beatles put out an album every year. And now your favorite artist puts out one every 5, 4,
Right.
unless it's a pop artist, then it's still usually every 2. But it's because that's not the game
Well,
anymore. The game now is just put out enough music to be relevant enough to fill the seats of the concerts. That's how you make your money, not via the album.
music is a commercial for merch and live
Yeah,
performances
for sure.
because Tater Tat is talking about WAP. So here's the thing.
I don't know who you are, Tater Tat, but you are a marvelous person.
Here's
Hilarious.
the thing, like, I have people bring this song up a lot because they always bring it up in like, well, that doesn't take any talent. I think it's brilliant
Really?
because I think from just the fact that it's a couple of women flipping off the entire male-dominated world, and men have been exploiting women forever. The second that women stand up and say, "We own our bodies and we're going to sing about our bodies," in a way that men talk about women either in public or while they're on Pornhub, right? Like, let's be real.
All right.
It is a boss move for them to do it because it got them on every headline, it got them on every TV station. It like none of us here were thinking ahead enough to do that song, but all of us would take that royalty check if we could get it. So the people who pick on that song, I just think it's brilliant. It is
I,
it
I, I,
is it the best song ever written? Is it like the pedestal of songwriting? No. But what it did was commercial. What it did was made a political and social statement, and we're still talking about it. Brilliant.
yeah. See, to me, that falls into the maybe it's a brilliant business thing that doesn't make it a brilliant song. So there's like a little distinction where like they
That's what I'm saying.
knew that song was going to explode because they first it's so vulgar that like you just like can't take your eyes off of it kind of thing, right? So I think they knew it was going to explode, so they knew what they were doing. So in that way, I guess it's brilliant, but like from a business standpoint, I don't think that makes the song brilliant. The song to me is just like
Well, that's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying.
is
It's not a
yeah. Yeah.
but does it take talent to make it? Yes.
Yeah. I'd have to listen to it again. I don't want to, but I'd have to listen to it again to feel like I could come out with a I yeah, yeah. I have a lot of thoughts on that one, but
But see,
I
that's
I feel like that's one of those things
see
too where, like,
the
they
thing is though,
self-exploited, so it's like, I don't,
but
like,
but
support the
here's
self-exploiting of they can write whatever they want, right? And they got the reaction they probably
listen,
wanted and were hoping for, which is fine,
listen though,
but
listen though, listen. Here's the thing. All of this is related to what we were talking about before. Because why did the Beatles get so popular? Because they were an FU to all of the
yeah,
music that was going on in the United States at the time.
yeah,
Yes, Orpheus says controversy and polarization is smart because
yeah,
people don't, if it doesn't work people up, they don't respond to it. So the reason why like a lot of artists do very extreme things to get known, like think about it,
yeah,
Prince. He wore freaking jock straps on stage with
yeah,
like leather chaps.
yeah,
Lady Gaga, meat dress. The Beatles doing things that were rebellious. Everybody who gets known breaks the mold somehow. And
yeah,
things that are just everyday don't get talked about.
that's
So I
true.
think if you're wanting to write songs for commercial,
Mm,
you're not going to get noticed if it's the same old safe mediocre stuff, right? So I think that's why I say it's brilliant. Like if it's a good song or not, that's subjective. Nobody knows, but nobody can argue that that song was a hit.
yeah,
Being a hit
for
is
sure.
objective.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. I guess just to me, like, it always feels cheap when it's like, uh, it's cheap to me when people use a, like, shtick that is just like, "Okay, but you're just trying to be." I guess
But
my old fuddy-duddy opinion on these things is always like, it yeah, yes, it helps and it can be a smart business thing, but if you just make something good, you don't have like it's like all the like manufactured controversies where it's like alternatively
yeah,
you could just make a good movie or you could just make a good whatever and then like people would go to the movie on its merits instead of
right.
like people going to it or listening to a song based on like the shock value. Whereas like shock value to me is just like the a lot of people throw around lowest form of art, so I'm not going to go there, but like it's one of those where it's like it's man, it's hard to
But
just be like, you've made a business decision that it's fine. You can do what you want, but
see that's the thing
on
though. Aren't
level, it's kind of like, but you're just trying to be different rather than like if it was a natural thing, maybe I would accept it more. If it because sometimes it is natural, right? Where it's like an artist is who they are, they're being
right.
real, and that happens to be countercultural or whatever. Um, but that to me is different than you trying to be. It's like the difference between like trying to be funny and just being funny, right? Like you can tell the difference. I don't know. It's just one of those yeah, things for me. But business wise, it is for sure
But see,
a brilliant move
but
as
that's
much
the
as
thing,
people
like,
disagree.
people say, "Well, they just did it for money." Yes, they did,
Yeah, almost certainly. Yeah,
and it
and
worked.
notoriety.
Right,
Notoriety. There we go.
but
Absolutely.
neither of the artists really needed that song necessarily to make or break them, right? Like, they
Yeah.
both had the
Well, at
people
least
involved
yeah.
had fan bases, right? But here's the thing. There's over 100,000 songs that are uploaded every single day to Spotify.
Mhm.
None of our songs are going to stand out when you have labels that are doing things like WAP.
Yeah.
Labels are pumping millions of dollars into promotion. They're pumping $1 million into bots that
Yeah.
are like none of the charts that you see are 100% real.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. I
So
mean,
the
the record
fact
companies have all the money, so it's yeah. It's a rigged game if you're trying to especially getting on the charts, back to the hit point, right? Hits are, at this point, almost entirely manufactured, I think. Outside
100%.
of, like, a YouTube sensation, that's a little different, right? Because then it's a result of the people clicked on it, and then they watched it for a certain amount of time, so the YouTube algorithm serves it up more. So that's maybe a little bit
Yeah.
different, but for everybody else, it's like, well, the real reason why Dua Lipa's new song is also a hit and I enjoy Dua Lipa. I probably shouldn't based on my normal standards. I'm not gonna lie, Dua Lipa does it for me. So like, not all of it. Some of it, I'm like, oh, I'm
Yeah.
more
Yeah.
embarrassed than usual to say this, but like some of her songs, even though the lyrics are, I still enjoy it sometimes. But like, I also recognize that it's not like, oh, Dua Lipa delivered again. There's an element to that, but it's also like her record company had all the radio stations play it, and then it appears on all the charts, and then it's on the Spotify top 40, and a lot of people will listen to the Spotify top 40, and a lot of people, it's like movies. The most popular movie and the best are
Uh,
rarely the same,
Totally.
frankly. But there is, I guess, like the encouraging side to this, right, is like, is it a completely losing battle for the hit song? I think almost yes, but also like you can make, if your goal is to make a living or just have an artistic fulfillment, you can have that without that, right? I mean, even beyond the fact that there's artists that make tons of money from just finding their own fan base, being independent. You can do that now because YouTube exists, right? I mean, there's some like YouTube bands. They started with covers to get attention, and then they make their own music. Hugely popular. They can tour. That can be their life, which is
Yeah.
awesome. Or if you don't really care about that part, which at this point, married, kid, so I like the idea of touring, but also like I kind of just want to make songs in my basement. Which is not to say I don't fantasize about doing some awesome shows. It's just like I never would want to be on the road for 100 days. But for me,
Right.
it's just like artistic fulfillment
I
and
think
trying to do something that I feel proud of. So all to say, for the hit thing, it's important, I think, for people to not worry about that.
100%. Like I
Yes.
think that's my point. We took the long road home here. I
Mm,
think if you're doing things for artistic purity
yeah.
and you're doing it because you're truly an artist, I personally think that in just the way that the world is right now, I don't think that is what will get you the commercial success, unfortunately.
That's
On
probably
on
true.
a
Yeah.
massive scale.
Oh, for sure. Oh, for sure.
But
Yeah.
see, now this Rich Men North of Richmond, I'm glad that Orpheus brought this song up because this is like one of those songs that goes viral. Like,
Yep.
think about this. Like, how many songs in the last how many years have done this? There's like 22
Yeah,
million songs released every single year. So your chances are less than 1 in 22 million to do this.
for sure.
But this song too is protesting
Yeah.
rich white dudes.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? So
Yeah.
there's a statement behind it that shakes people up. And
Yeah.
that's what gets the attention because I've heard people who love this song. I've heard people that hate this song. The Republicans think it's about Joe Biden. Oliver has actually come out and said it's actually about the Republicans and it's not about Joe Biden. Like, we're not getting into politics here. But, like, again, art, and I've said this to other people and sometimes they take it to the extreme, but I think art should piss people off. Obviously, WAP pissed people off, made a
Yeah.
lot of money. This other song pissed people off, makes a lot of money. Things that cause emotional reaction are what get attention.
Yeah. I I guess where it loses me though is like there's a difference to me between polarization and something that I don't think art necessarily divides or brings together so much as it needs to be true to the person who's making it, I guess. So the danger to me is like just being polarizing for polarizing sake is a I guess it's along the lines of like I hate that like everything's politicized now. It's very irritating because like there's a lot of things that's like this shouldn't be a political thing, but
Right.
everything kind of becomes that, and it makes everything. It makes it so like to be successful, you have to be divisive so that one side loves it and one side hates it, which is like unfortunately that is where everything is right now.
Yeah.
So on the popularity side, like if that's the game people want to play, all right. But like really, because some people too say like, oh, art is about bringing people together. I don't really buy that either necessarily. And just by nature of like anytime you're successful, people are going to hate you, right? People hate
Right.
Shakespeare just because he's, or like even if the Beatles weren't super popular, I would have very little opinion about the Beatles. I viscerally dislike the Beatles because they're super popular and I don't think they deserve it. So like that to me is just like, I think they're overrated. That kind of irritates me. So like anytime you're popular, it's going to become more divisive. But
So, uh, I think my point with all of this too is I just write songs and I don't really worry about where they're gonna go. I also believe that if you make it, there's an audience there. Does that mean your
yeah,
audience is the same size as other people? No.
sure.
But there's somebody out there, if you like it, there's probably others that like it too. You're never going to force people to like what you do. You just have to find the people that automatically like it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think there's an audience for almost anything, which is maybe yeah. Wait a second. Yeah, I think let me read Orpheus's first. I'm trying to read the comments and also converse at the same time.
I
I say good art communicates truth through emotion. I lean towards agreeing on that. I lean towards agreeing on that. I have to think about that more to think about it. But like I do think art needs to be grounded in reality. So I think some people take this too far where they're like, "Oh, but sci-fi is like not real because or maybe like Star Wars. Star Wars isn't real because, that's not how space works. So it can't be good art by that definition." Like, no, 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 wait a second. It's about like
but isn't it
real
a
can mean many different things in many different contexts or genres. So like even though, yeah, there's no such thing as Jedi and Sith, the story of like Darth Vader or whatever is something that is a human story that can resonate with people, that even the mighty can fall, and even the all the talent in the world, if misplaced, you can turn to the dark side. So like I do think that art needs to touch on something real, and if it's not based in truth, it's hard to be like, well, if it's not communicating something true, back to a point I think you made earlier, where like truth doesn't need to be literally true, but it needs
right?
to communicate a truth, right? So like at some point we
Yes.
have to relate to it. It doesn't mean we have to agree with it. But something I like to say is, to me, art should never have a message. And what I mean by that is that it becomes propaganda when people sit and they're like, I'm writing a song to say X or to convince people of Y. To me, it's like I don't know what the discernible difference between, whether you agree with it or not, I don't think there's any discernible difference between that and propaganda. But if you sit and you write something that is more of a discovery thing, of course your worldview is going to come out naturally. I think that's fine.
Yeah.
But there's a difference between like, I have a certain worldview and I'm going to write songs. So you'll probably be able to figure out some of that worldview via my songs. And me
Right.
saying, I'm going to preach this message to you because I believe it. And I'm going to bang you over the head with it, which I think where like art has gone wrong recently, especially with movies, where it's like everything is just like message, 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 message. And people
Mm,
confuse that like, it's not that people necessarily disagree with the message. That's not why people are pissed. It's because of the natural condescension of like, you're not just like, make a good, we'll pick on Star Wars, make a good Star Wars thing. Nobody cares about any of the other, just make good Star Wars. But like, if it feels like you're just using it to communicate a message, whether somebody agrees with it or not, anybody who's looking for art, I think that's why NF is successful. Again, a large part of it is like the concentration on real over like, I have a message that I'm going to shove in your face, which again, I don't think it matters whether somebody agrees with it or not. For me personally, even whether it's a movie or a song, if I agree with the message, but it feels like a message to me, I hate it. I like, because I can tell that the
everybody
person
does. Yeah.
manipulates me. Sometimes more successfully than others, and oftentimes they're so bad about it. It's not manipulative; it just pisses you off. The worst
That's
sometimes is you do agree with it, sort of, but it's like, but you did this in such a horrible way that like I actually want to disagree with you now, which sometimes
yes.
happens. But I don't know. So that's like a deep seated thing for me, where it's like I'm not entirely sure that I'm right about this take, but to me, if you're sitting and you're saying I am trying to say message X, you're not making art, you're making propaganda. Um, which I'm pretty strong in that opinion, but I'm willing to possibly be, but
No,
Yeah,
I mean,
it's an
I
interesting
think
thing.
that's true, like, I mean, even if it's not political, right? Like, just take the whole, like, trying to a message, like, sometimes people be like, "The world needs more love," is the message, right? Okay, that's great, we really do. But if alls your
Yeah,
song does is say, "You need to do this, and we need to do this, and you need to do this," we all just tune it out because it just
yeah,
becomes this cliche, like, crap,
yeah,
right? It's like,
yeah.
how do you get people to do the math without actually saying it? Show, not tell, right?
Yes, for sure,
That's the thing.
for sure.
Car Chronicles made a really good point, and, you know, a lot of art, and people can argue back and forth too, but a lot of Caucasian artists really did take, like, influences and literally just steal some things from the African American artists that couldn't get the same coverage back in the day, and it still happens, which is gross.
Yeah, I mean, so it definitely happened back in the day, for sure, and I'm sure it still happens now, but, like, at some point, it does have to become a, like, does anybody own, say, a genre, right? Like, nobody owns a genre, right? So I think some people have, like, overreacted, and it's become, like, anytime somebody does something that's vaguely reminiscent, it's kinda like the Sue fests that are happening, right? Ed Sheeran
Yeah.
gets sued every day, and if I remember correctly, the Photograph one was pretty convincing, like, "Oh, he definitely stole that song." If I remember correctly, I might be wrong, but I think I remember hearing the other one, and I'm like, "That is the same." But, like, I think, like, Dua Lipa, I think it was, got, like, sued over, like, a chord progression. It's like, okay,
Yeah.
at some point, if you're gonna make yourself a victim or what, like, always people are inspired by things that came before it. So,
So
like,
here's the
it's
thing,
unfortunate
like,
that it happens. I'm sure it was particularly nefarious at certain times in the past for sure. But, like, at some point, I feel like as artists, it's important to, like, not have all those worries in our head about, like, "Oh, so sued because I have a chord progression that's been used," and all that, where it's like, make just go make art, and don't be so
yes.
worried about, like, somebody's gonna accuse you of stealing some whatever, or that you took from whatever culture, and it's like, okay, we're in America. Like, the cultures are all, like, the idea that a culture owns anything is just like, they don't anymore. There were times maybe that sort of was more of a thing,
Yeah.
but, like, man, I mean, anything where, like, you say, "Oh, this was so and so's culture," it's like, "Well, go back a little further," and you'll find that actually before them it was this other one, and before them it was another one, and it turns into this, like, endless game of, like, no, just go make art. Don't worry about the, like, if you are stealing, shame on you. Don't do that. But on the
Right.
individual
Like,
basis, just
plagiarism at all is not
yeah,
good.
it's awful. But, like, also don't be too worried about, I see Ryan Johnson and I stop immediately. Tater Tat, we're gonna be best friends, man. I guess I don't know if you're a guy. I'm getting the vibe that you are based on some of the ways you say these things, but I could be wrong. But yeah, no, Ryan Johnson did subvert my expectations as well in making a just that movie's so bad.
So
So
going
bad.
back to what you're saying about,
Ugh.
like, if someone's gonna accuse you of stealing something, they're not gonna accuse you of stealing something unless you're making money on it.
Yes. Oh, for sure. For sure.
No
Yeah,
one no one cares that the song that I just wrote sounds like something else, right? Like,
absolutely.
but if I made $3 million on it, then people are gonna care, right? It's not about it's never about the music, right? It's like,
Yeah,
yeah, and Orpheus, genres can be copyrighted, right?
yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Um, no, I think the moral of this whole long conversation that took us down many winding roads is, like you just said, make art. Um, Also, making money with your art is gonna be the hardest thing you've ever freaking done, and there's no magic
Yeah.
website that you buy a membership to that's gonna make it any easier.
Yes.
Like, there's
Yes.
no such thing as sending your song somewhere and someone just hearing it and magically you all of a sudden have a career. Doesn't happen.
Yes. Yeah. Don't
None
give
of
your
that stuff
money to that.
happens.
Yeah.
Here
Yeah.
we have actually a question getting us back on track here.
Yeah.
Any tips on how to keep from perseverating on existing lyrics? I tend to be
Ooh,
original, but I
that's a big
find
flex
rhythm.
right there because I don't know that word, and I like to think I'm at least decent with words, but unless he means persevere. No.
Perseverating?
Perseverating. I assume
Where's
that
so
it
on
means to, like,
existing
keep evolving the melody.
how to well, he
Uh,
says how to keep from does that mean maybe, like, inadvertently stealing existing melodies?
yeah.
Um,
Again, that's one of those things where it's like, man, I feel like my advice is don't worry about it because you're probably not going
oh,
to.
getting stuck. He says getting stuck.
Okay, getting stuck
Oh,
with meaning like
yeah.
developing a single melody within a song? Like you wrote your
I
verse
think what he's
melody,
saying is I think what he's saying is something that I deal with in my own writing is that I start to repeat certain melodic structure. Like, it just like, I have a style and it's really hard to break it.
mhm,
Um, what I
mm,
do is I try to, not come up with my melody by singing it. I try to come up,
yeah,
by playing it. Um, and I will also take a rhythm, just a rhythm, not the pitches, from other songs that I did not write,
mm,
and I will use that rhythm to create my own melody.
mm,
What I would mean by that is, like, if you took "Who Let the Dogs Out," it'd be dot, 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 dot. That's a rhythm. Nobody
yeah,
owns that rhythm, right? Dot,
yeah,
dot, 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 dot. I could put other melody to it, other lyrics
mhm,
to it. Now that's something that I may not have come up with before.
yeah,
So, like, I've written some songs I've used, like, songs that I really like. I'm like, I wouldn't have come up with that rhythm. So I'm gonna use that and create different pitches to it.
yeah,
Um, do you
yeah,
have any tips on that?
yeah. I'd first double down on the first thing you said. I found for me, man, when I realized that my melodies are way better when I write them on the piano. And just real quick, I'll give a couple reasons why I think this is not just true for me. So, because I think people are going to be quick to be like, "Oh, you were a pianist first. That's why." I think that's a part of why. But also, like all the great composers except Vivaldi are pianists. Just throwing that out there. And I don't think it's because like I think it's just because the piano is one of the best composing instruments because you can play multiple notes at the same time in a way that you can't on like any other instrument. Even a guitar, you're pretty limited with those six strings and the fingerings you can do.
Oh, the Spectrum gods got you again. He'll probably come back. Orpheus did the lookup here for us on that word. To repeat, prolong an action, thought, or utterance after the stimulus that prompted it has ceased, so it gets stuck.
Just in general,
Oh,
since I think I'm back, I did not diss Vivaldi. I just said I called him one of the great composers. I just said he's the only one I can think of that's not a pianist. So I did not diss Vivaldi. If anything, I complimented him because he doesn't have the advantage of being a pianist, at least that I know of. Maybe he was just not as much a pianist. Whatever. Doesn't really matter. But um, so I think it's because if you don't have perfect pitch, you can't really visualize a melody when you sing it. And also your voice is going at least not to the degree that you can looking at a keyboard for sure. Unless you have perfect pitch, then maybe you can. I don't have perfect pitch. I wouldn't know.
yeah.
But if you're blessed with that, great, good for you. That's amazing. But for us mortals that don't have perfect pitch, it's way easier to visualize your melody. And I think that you should never change your melody because of the visual, right? Visual should never trump audio because it's a song. But I do think it's a tool in the tool belt that like you might think, why is my melody boring? And then if you played it on the keyboard, you would immediately be like, oh, I didn't move more than a third for the whole verse, which maybe isn't a problem, but sometimes that's might be why it's boring. Is your melody didn't go anywhere. Your whole song, it just kind of stayed in the same place. That's going to be immediately evident when you're writing on a keyboard. With a keyboard, you also it's trivial to like jump up by a fifth, which is something that vocally probably almost all of us can do. A fifth isn't massive. There are songs that go up by an octave. Somewhere Over the Rainbow, My Heart Will Go On, both have octave
Yeah.
jumps. Now I get Celine Dion's one of the greatest of all time vocalists. I get that. But like not greatest of all time vocalists can still sing that song down far to pitch and all that. But um So I think another element is it's helpful to have the visual element where when you're playing on an instrument, you can actually see like, oh, I'm not going anywhere, and you're more likely to take risks with like, I'll try going up by a fifth or a sixth. Whereas vocally, especially if you're trying to strum your guitar and you're trying to stay on pitch, nobody likes to be off pitch. You're probably gonna stay kind of safe with your melody writing. So that's one,
Mhm.
and then other things are like try reversing your melody. Literally take your melody, and if you record it in a MIDI, try reversing it, or just think about like different things that you haven't tried before where you're like, I notice all my melodies descend. So instead,
Right.
say to yourself, for this song, I'm going to make sure that primarily it ascends. Or maybe your melodies go places. Maybe when I say your melody doesn't go anywhere, you're like, my melodies go somewhere. I don't know who you're talking about. In that case, maybe try having a more stationary melody. Have one that's more just all right in the James Taylor range, right? I think James Taylor's great. He totally
Yeah.
breaks that rule. So it kind of depends on what you're going for, but those type of things can help, I think.
Um, there's a couple things in the chat that I wanna get to, but you said something about, like,
Mm,
the melodies that have too much motion to them, right?
yeah.
I also think that a lot of times songwriters, for some reason, think repetition is bad, and I think
Yeah,
we don't use repetition as a tool as much as we should, right?
yeah,
Like, if you have a cool line, like, use the rule of 2, right? Like, do it
mhm,
again, but then don't do it another time until you do something else, right? Like, use the
yeah,
AABA kind of thought process.
sure. And
Um,
a little change goes a long way, right? Take your
totally.
exact melody, change one note. Maybe it ascended at the end by a whole step, descend by a half step or whatever is right in your key. But like just descend on the last note instead. And all of a sudden it might be different enough. Don't feel the need to over it's one of those interesting tensions as an artist, right? On the one side, you want
Yeah.
to say don't overcomplicate. And I think that's true. But I also think it's true that a lot of people lean towards probably overly simplistic. So it's also good to encourage people to like learn to be maybe more refined and
But
so
how do
there's
you
always that tension of like simple is can be good, but simple is not inherently good.
but so
So it's like a weird tension.
here's how you can determine what you should use. What are you trying to say? Like,
Mm,
is your topic, like, maybe you're writing a song about being stuck, right? Like, I feel like my life is in one spot and I'm not going anywhere. What kind of melody are you gonna use?
yeah.
You're gonna use a stationary
Stagnant
melody.
one, yeah.
What it would like it so, like, use the how am I feeling or how do I want the listener to feel to make those decisions when you're writing. Tater
Mm,
Tat said, "Writing vocal melodies on an instrument, you can easily make phrasing sound too instrumental and not like a human." 100% true. I think for me, I start on the instrument and then I sing it until it becomes more natural and so it fits like the
yeah.
voice.
That was gonna be my response as well.
Um, and
Al
for
also, you should be singing as you're doing it, right? So, like,
correct,
it's not one of those things where, like, you write your whole vocal melody with the keyboard, and you never even tried to sing it. No, no, no.
correct.
It's you write it, you work on it there, and then you sing it. You say, "Does it work for my voice?" So, certainly, you shouldn't be going into, like, recording vocal takes, and you've never actually tested whether it works as a vocal melody.
Um,
Although that being said, definitely it has been a thing that has come up a couple of times where, like, the breaths specifically, I found that I didn't test well enough sometimes for the
yes.
breaths. Um,
Um,
so that can be a temptation for sure.
Brian also says if he writes a song, sometimes someone might hear another song in particular, because he couldn't get out of his head when he was writing it. I think that happens because of chords and stuff too, because the way we hear chords, we kind of navigate to things we've heard before. I think that's where you can sort of think like, well, I keep like, let's say you have a G chord, right? The G, B, D. You know, your instinct is to sing one of those chordal tones. The
Mhm.
thing that you can do is think like, well, what happens if I sing a non-chordal tone? Like, what if I sing an A? That creates kind of a nice tension, and that's not where my
Sure.
ear would necessarily go. Or what if you sang an E on top of that G
Mm,
chord? Then you sort of create this inverted E minor 7 chord, right?
yep.
Like, think outside of the chordal tones to come up with more interesting melodies too. So the chordal tones are always like the 3 or the 1-3-5, right? So think of like the 2-4-6-7s and see what you can do with that. Um,
And another thing too is you're always gonna have people. This is actually another. I have a lot of pet peeves, but is another pet peeve I kind of have where like some people, and a lot of times they mean well and they mean it as a compliment. They're like, "Oh, this sounds like song X," right? And what they're trying to say is, "Here's this professional songwriter who makes lots of money. I think your song sounds as good as that does." A lot of times they're trying to say that.
right.
But sometimes, because he says, if I write a song, maybe someone hears a bit of another song in a particular verse. Some people will be listening for that and will tell you that even if your song doesn't sound anything like that song. There's been many
Yeah.
times I will go and listen to the song that somebody has said that to me about, and I'm like, I don't like this has almost no relation at all. The chords
Mhm.
aren't even kind of the same. The melody's not kind of the same. My vocal style is totally different. But people will say that sort of thing, and most of the time, I think that's the thing that you can almost write off. Like, I guess what I'm saying is, if you've ever, because I've been here, if you've ever been in a position where you think you get like self conscious because somebody says that
Yep.
your song sounds like another song, go listen to the song and it'll probably make you feel better, or just don't go listen to the song and don't worry about it because the person is almost they're probably trying to be nice, they probably mean well, but
But
they don't know what they're talking about, and they're just trying to be nice. But probably
the
doesn't sound that much like that
well,
song.
there's a difference between sounding similar and
Yes,
actually being
copied. Yeah,
copied,
yeah,
right? Like, I mean, I do that too. Like, I hear new songs, and like, I've been around long enough to where I have like decades of music in my brain, like
yeah,
a lot of us. And I hear new songs, and I'll be like, that sounds like Ambrosia. Do you
yeah,
know what I mean? And it's
yeah,
like, some people be like, who, what,
yeah.
you know?
Yeah, not to mention people are listening for different things. So you might notice that the
Totally.
guitar tone and the phrasing is kind of like that. Somebody else is like, but the melody is totally different. And
Or
and
sometimes melodies are similar, but like, it's
yeah.
just because it walks up the scale. Like, nobody owns the scale.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure. And just like yeah, it's just one of those things that is probably going to come up for everybody here over and over again, where it's just a thing that I think you got to learn to kinda shut out that noise, although if you do find yourself actually feeling like you're kinda sounding too much like the songs you're listening to lately, a thing I have done before that was super helpful is I just stopped listening to other music for, like, a month, and then I didn't have those songs in my head anymore, and I no longer wrote stuff that sounded like it because I cleared my brain over the month, and all I did was, like, just made my own music, so that's all I had in my head was my own stuff. And that kind of helped me because especially early on, I do think it's more common to struggle sounding too much like what you like early because you don't
Yep.
you haven't like learned to kind of. I think there's many elements to it, right? A part of it is you kind of learn your sound over time. So like early on, Five for Fighting was a big influence on my sound. So I think you probably would have heard even more of that before. Whereas, like, eventually I kind of piled on other elements. The way that I tend to arrange guitars is not at all like Five for Fighting. I also my vocal style is completely different. He uses a lot of falsetto. I'm more belt high notes, breaking Benjamin. I'm
Yeah.
even inclined to put some rock tone in there, even in a non-rock song. So like you kind of build your identity around different artists you like, or maybe artists that you don't like, but you do think, I would like them if they change this part. And then eventually, like you kind of arise out of that, where like eventually it's kind of like, you know what, you could hear little influences maybe, but you kind of become your own artist. So that's another thing where like just know that on your growth path, probably early on you will seem less original, but you will probably
Right.
naturally get more original sounding over time.
And everybody's the sum of their influences, right?
For
Like,
sure.
if you listen to your favorite artists and you listen to who inspired them, you'll
Yeah.
even hear how they incorporated in,
Mhm.
it's I think that's the nature of art.
Yeah.
Was it Austin Kleon who wrote the book, like, Great Artists Steal or something like that?
Steal like an artist.
Steal Like
Yes.
an Artist,
Yeah.
yeah. Um, yeah, I always think about that. Like, there's it's impossible to come up with something that's completely original in music, right?
Yeah.
Like, there's only so many notes.
Yeah. There's nothing
It
new under the sun. Yeah.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
Hey, I'm starting to run out of gas. I know it's like 10 o'clock where you
Yeah.
are.
Yeah. If anybody was
Um,
with us this whole time, you are a absolute champion because I probably wouldn't have been. I watch long live streams, but man,
I know.
we're not that interesting.
Well, I think we should do it again because I like it. I like
Yeah,
it.
for sure.
Um,
Yeah, we'll talk about it, it's probably not on this, but, me and actually Orpheus Audio Academy, AKA Reagan, are, we're gonna be doing a live thing, and the goal is
cool.
actually for it to be a thing where, like, people come in and out. It's not like a hour show necessarily as much as, like,
Nice.
we have guests on, and you've already come up as a alright, which one? Which one which one will, because we couldn't decide whether it's like, oh, is 3 people too much for the first time and all that, but, certainly, we would love to have you for sure. Not to
Well,
mention
thank you.
on
Yeah.
my podcast at some point if you're willing, but we'll
Oh,
talk about that later.
absolutely. No,
This
this is
this was a
fun.
pleasure, though. This was fun, and
Well,
thank you to all
thanks.
the commenters for helping us, because
Yes. Yes.
I think they ended up prompting almost all the content here, which hopefully was helpful, but
Yeah, we've got a lot of we should do it again, so
it's
definitely.
good. That's good. It's good to not
And, you
have
know,
haters
and
at the end.
not have haters at the end.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
No,
get the haters over with at the beginning. I'm just kidding. That was just the one.
I mean, we've
So
had quite a few people that have been watching, like, you know, the whole time. Victor says, "What if Trey was John
crazy.
Mayer?" That's not John Mayer style. Um, no, but thank you, Joseph. This has been super fun, and, like, if I wasn't getting tired, I could keep going, but
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I have to work in
And
the
we have to
morning,
think about
so
the audience. Yes.
we have to think about the audience. Yes, it's not all about us.
Yeah.
Um, but no, I think this is awesome. So I'm glad that you did it, and
I'm glad
yeah,
you invited me. I'm glad you reached out, by the way. Props to you on I was always scared to reach out to fellow YouTubers. You're the first one ever to reach out to me, and I'm glad you did. I'm glad you did.
awesome. Well, yeah,
Yeah.
no, I like I said, the first time we talked ever, we talked for 5 hours, and now we're going on
That's
3.
so
So
fast.
it's a pattern. It's a pattern.
Yeah, for sure. All right.
But
Well, thank you
awesome.
again so much. This was a blast. Thank you, commenters, as well.
Yeah, so we'll see everybody later. Joseph, you can hang on here and we can finish up, but everybody have a good night and check out Songwriter Theory if you're not on that site, and check out my site as well. So
Unless
thanks
you learned to
everybody.
hate me in the last 3 hours.